Good morning and welcome. It is October 16th, 2023. It's our 9 a.m. Monday strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Kearns, Commissioner Jordan, Commissioner CUNY in the conference room, Commissioner French is on Zoom, and Commissioner Waldorf, I think, will be joining us on Zoom at some point. So thank you. And then we got our executive management team. And we are talking budgets again this morning. So I don't know, Randy, if you want to lead it off or just let.
We're going to start with Don's presentation this morning.
Okay.
And then we'll do fair and equitable after that, and we'll get into budget details.
Very good. So.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. So, again, Don Hooper from Detention Services. Along with me is Jason Robinson, the Lieutenant at Southern Geiger in charge of programs, and Bryce Miller, Finance Manager. Darren Lehman wasn't able to make it. He got stuck in San Diego today, so he wasn't able to make it back. So that's what I said, not stuck. But,
yeah.
It's a horrible thing, got stuck. So next slide, please. So Spokane County Detention Services, our mission statement is to ensure the safety of the community by managing safe, secure, humane, and fiscally responsible institutions for inmate housing and programming. So, next slide. So, housing services, some of the big things contributing this year, medical and dental, increases in medical and dental, maintenance of aging facilities, increasing transport numbers. We transport twice a week to Ellensburg, transport once a week north and south, and the numbers are continuing to come up since COVID since the shuttle was reduced and eliminated during COVID. So, food service, we're having about $2 million a year, and it's like 1 million meals prepared from detention services between the two facilities. We also prepare meals for detention or for juvenile detention. We prepared all their meals as well. The facilities, jail was built in '86, the downtown jail, and Geiger was in 1952. So continually working on this year has been plumbing, cameras, electrical, that kind of thing. So next page. So programming, right now we're down to 2 work crews. Some of that was staffing. We'd reduced the staffing originally, but now it's eligible inmates. And so as of last week, we only had 6 inmates within detention services out of 855 that were eligible for work crew. So just the seriousness of the charges now. At any one time, we just don't have the inmates that are eligible for crews. So a lot of work crews, AGC, faith-based programs, reduced during COVID due to not wanting inmates out of the buildings, not wanting members of the public back into the buildings. But ever since then, staffing and the number of eligible inmates has kept those things still been closed down. The hope is in January, we're moving staff out, removed 3 staff out in January. So hiring numbers are coming up. So 3 in January and maybe a little 3 later on. So we're hiring 7 this month, 7 November 1st. And so we're planning on maybe 8 or 10 in January as well. So hopefully we can bring the staffing numbers up and open up some of the programming and open maybe another floor to alleviate some of the population issues we're dealing with downtown. So anything else here, Jason? Next page, ADP. Prior to COVID, we were in the 960 range. COVID would drop down to 932. And as you see in 21, 22, and 23, we're up to 845. We expect another 20 or 40 if the numbers remain the same. So we're looking at 865 to 885 for next year if things continue at the same rate. And Geiger's fluctuating typically between 180 and 150 and 190. Last week it was in the 150s, and most of that was kind of the same thing, no eligible inmates to go out there. And so downtown's over full. It's causing us to go to red light multiple times last week. But we have 30 or 40 vacancies out of Geiger. So right now it's not caused by staffing, although that has been an issue in the past. The issues out of Geiger right now are just eligible inmates. Yes.
So Don, so when we saw the numbers like in 2018, 19, that high, were more out at Geiger at that time?
More out of Geiger. We were in the 360 range, Jason.
No, pre-COVID, we were in the up about 300 consistently.
Okay, and it's just the eligible people now.
Yeah, we've seen a shift since COVID of the eligibility of the inmates that are incarcerated. Fewer and fewer are becoming Geiger eligible.
I think I have, well, right now it's just the number of violent. So like Class A's, 220 Class A felonies. I think it might have it on the next page, but as of this morning, it was 220 listed under violent felonies. So it's just a higher level offender than ever. And all of those are always downtown, so.
Commissioner French?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Is the population also a reflection of some of the changes that have happened at the legislature with regard to our ability for our law enforcement officers to actually, apprehend people that are doing bad actions, or, decriminalizing marijuana, or a number of other things that has impacted those numbers?
I would say so. The two misdemeanor drug charges, now that both the city and the county are arresting for misdemeanor drug charges for drug use, public drug use, but they are also, because of our population numbers, they're immediately released as well. So they're part of a book and release on the bond schedule that district and municipal court approves. So both of those are predominantly released right away. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, it did. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So yeah, as of every day last week, we've sent everything. So we're sending 2 or 3 or 5 bodies out of Geiger, inmates out of Geiger each time. It's just the only eligible ones we have. So we send them out as soon as a bed's open.
So the statement that some of the Spokane City Council members have been saying about the reason why more people aren't at Geiger is because we're a few corrections officers short out there, that would be incorrect.
I'm sorry, yeah, as of right now, that is not correct. The reason we don't have more inmates out of Geiger right now, today, last week, in recent times, is eligible inmates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but I'm gonna correct it. But there was a time where we did reduce the population because of staffing,
We did.
but that's gone away.
Yeah.
So
That's not the problem now. Yeah, and we moved inmates, I'm trying to think, probably mid 2020 and mid 2020. I'm sorry, we moved officers mid 2020 and mid 2021. And it was just to alleviate some of the overtime issues downtown. Tried to balance the number of officers, the amount of overtime between all staff at both facilities. We're coming pretty close. We think we've gone a little too far, and we're going to, same thing, move 3 officers out to Geiger in January to try to balance that out. So right now the overtime's a little higher for the officers out at Geiger than it is downtown. So, but that was the problem at one time in the 21 and 22, but now it's eligible inmates.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Keep going.
And next page.
Don, can you go back one?
Yes.
That drop that happened in 20, remind us, there was 2 prongs to that. One was COVID, if I'm not mistaken, for social distancing. There was a requirement to release certain inmates out to reduce the number of folks, and I may have misstated or may have not gotten the wording correctly there. But then that was also about the same time the Blake decision to decriminalize is that felony possession, right?
Correct.
So our felony C's suddenly dropped off because it was no longer a charge.
Correct.
Did I get both those right?
I think you did, other than misconception was detention services. We never
Not you guys.
we didn't request any releases. The courts, municipal and district took it upon themselves, and then there was just less arrests. They just the police officers weren't bringing as many people in just with the unknown of COVID, I think.
Was Blake in 20 or was Blake the following year in 21? I thought that we were well into the pandemic when it happened, but I don't recall.
I'm not sure, but Blake Decision did have a marked increase or marked notice. We noticed a decrease in booking almost immediately.
Okay.
So the timeline, I'm not sure.
Same time. Maybe we were talking about that last week.
I think it was like 14.
Commissioner Waldron?
Either way, about the same time.
Oh, I was just going to ask about folks who are eligible for the work release and or work groups. Is it really folks that are serving sentence rather than awaiting trial? Isn't it the majority of folks out at Geiger, they're serving out a sentence, or has that changed?
No, I didn't hear all the questions, so I'm just gonna kind of answer the end of it. So most of the participants in our programs are pre-adjudicated. Most of our population throughout detention services is pre-adjudicated. It's a small amount, it's usually single-digit percentage that's sentenced. So we try to prioritize those, but based upon multiple circumstances, a pre-adjudicated can be participating in work crew, suds treatment, breaking barriers. So we just try to make a guesstimate based upon how long we think they're going to be in custody, so we get the best bang for the buck as far as who we enroll, because the turnover is pretty high.
Voluntary, right.
Yeah, it's all voluntary, yes.
And then Commissioner, one of the things we looked at, last week was just, as of last week, middle of last week, there was only 40 sentenced inmates out at Geiger, I think was the number out of 155. So it's still a small percentage. And then downtown was another 40 downtown out of the 650 that were downtown that day. So it was just one day we picked out, it was about 80 sentenced inmates in custody.
What makes one work crew eligible? What's the criteria for that?
Court authorization of a classification score and just a willingness to participate. So based upon their charges, like we don't put DBs on work crew, they have to be court authorized, and sometimes we're just looking for a check mark on a court order. Sometimes we can backtrack if we got a person we think is eligible or somebody that's been on the crew before and been a good participant. We can backtrack and ask the courts if they'll authorize them. But we just see less and less of those type of offenders that are in the system now. It's just like with AGC, it's a great program, but by the time you factor in who's going to be around long enough to complete the program, who had the classification score to leave the facility and be outside the gate, and then also a willingness and a want to participate, each one of those just starts eliminating people, so you wind up with a small group. And you may start out with a big group, but once you start filtering, you wind up with less participants.
Is there like a magic score or something that makes somebody that crosses that threshold?
We call it's a 9 within our classification system. And I mean, I don't know if it's behavior in custody as well as current charges and past charges while in custody within the last 10 years. So, so it's kind of all over the board. We have a score sheet with it. So it's a well-accepted classification system that a lot of the jails within the state use.
Just one follow-up. You said that through January, if you end up hiring some more officers, you may be able to open up another floor. Are you talking about Geiger? What do you mean by that?
Right now, there's no reason to open up another floor. There's the same thing, no eligible inmates. It's really to alleviate the overtime right now because the officers out there are reading overtime. And so we're trying to look at like a relief on either side of the weekend or either side of the week to just like a sick relief position. We do talk periodically about moving females back out to Geiger, but we just don't have, as of right now, we don't have enough eligible females to open up a whole floor.
Okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay. Next page.
Now for what everybody was hoping for, budget. So this is our 2024 budget broken down into our 8 main categories or main main primary dollar amounts. For salary and benefits, we have 37.5 million for next year. That amount has been reduced by about 2.3 million for vacancy reductions. So in reality, it would be closer to 40 million if we had the full budget for every position that has been authorized. But that reflects the $2.3 million reduction. Medical services, 9.8 million. Our county cost allocation, and I'm going to skip over food, our county liability insurance and county IT services. So those are internal county departments that charge for their services, and those amounts are given to us by either IT or the budget office or risk management. And that comprises almost 12% of our budget, 11.5, I think, of our budget is for those internal services. We've got our kitchen, food, and supplies, 2 million, and then our remaining, skipped over Geiger facility lease, and our Geiger facility lease is just under $500,000 estimated for 2024, and there's a slide on that coming up. And then our bottom line is our remaining M&O that we call, or that I call, our controllable M&O. The rest of them are either contracts or items that were given through the county ID identified costs, for a total of 61.1 million for our budget next year. Next slide, please. Actually, stay on that one for one more second. In that remaining M&O, our big categories are building equipment, repair and maintenance, Geiger utilities, commissary items that we purchase that the inmates then buy through commissary, household supplies including paper towels, toilet paper, gloves. Law library is included in that for our publications for the inmates, and substance use disorder treatment, our contract with Pioneer is included in that, 4.3 million also. And lots of other miscellaneous items in there, but those are the big contributors, and that's it for that slide. If you want to go to the next, that's great. This one is a comparison of 23 to 24. 24 column is identical to the prior slide. We're going to hit on the big changes other than the county issued ones. So county cost allocation, county liability, and county IT. Like I said before, those are given to us as supplied. We don't make any changes to those numbers that were given. So we'll talk about medical services, inmate food and kitchen supplies, and the Geiger lease coming up in the next few slides. The salary and benefits line item is the one I wanted to point out here. You see a 5.4% increase. Our primary union contracts in our department all have cost of living of 6% coming January 1st. So that 5.4 is as anticipated. Our 1553, I think, are a little bit lower, which contribute to it being a little bit less, but most of our employees are 492 that will be getting a 6%. So that's right in line with where we thought it would be. Next slide, please.
Can I ask, how many vacant positions do you have right now?
As of the hiring group, November 1st, it'll be 28 corrections officer positions. I believe we have 2 DSTA positions, 2 cook positions, and 2 case diversion managers. There's a few others, but predominantly 28 for the corrections officers. So I just want to highlight.
And that's November 1st.
November
As
1st.
of November 1st, we're down. As of today, 43 total.
And Bryce, I wanted to highlight
Yes.
one thing, because the unions voted on 12-hour shifts just last week. They approved 12-hour shifts moving forward, so that's now in the contract. I think that's good for detention services on a number of different levels. One is just a more efficient schedule. And I think most of the officers want it, and it gets people away from the work site more. But for this year, we project about 58,000 hours of overtime for detention services. Last year was 63, so it's a pretty marked reduction in overtime. It's just a more efficient schedule. There's built-in relief on both sides, and a pretty large decrease in double time as well. After 3 mandatories for a month, after we mandate somebody for overtime 3 times, it goes to double time by contract. And so obviously that's very expensive hours, and it was 9,000 last year, and it's going to be about 5,000 hours this year. So it's big decrease in mandatory overtime as well, which is better financially as well as just better for the corrections officers, so.
Right, no, I think it's, for the safety of them,
Yeah.
that it's important, so, thank you.
I hear about it every week, just being out of there, being away from that work environment 3 and 4 days a week, it's good for the officers. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry.
Don and Bryce, back on the previous one, salaries and benefits, so pre-2023, this was consistent across the county, we budgeted for hope and aspiration that we'd be fully staffed all the time. And we stopped that in 2023, we went down to more of a reality-based, what do we think we're gonna be? So can you share with the commissioners, what was budgeted as vacancies, vacant positions, or vacancy adjustment in 23, and has that changed in 24?
Almost exactly the same. It was 2.3 this year, and I want to say 2.2 last year as a reduction. So that, which kind of holds that 6%, that 5.5%, why it kind of reflects what we're expecting in the cost of living in position years.
How would that represent?
Position wise, ooh, gosh, I'd have to go back and find total. I think it was a total of 30, because if we go corrections officers, it's about 100,000 per. So between 25 and 30 was the total reduction.
We've been hanging right between 25 and 35, it back and forth, depends on hiring groups for law enforcement and things. It's been really close. I don't think we've been under 25 vacancies for corrections officers. I don't think we've been over 35. It's really bounced right in that range. On a positive note, we just had another written test. So even though we're hiring in November, we overlap the group. So we just had another written test. Pretty big turnout numbers. I think we had 39 turnout, which is a pretty good number. And my training department is telling me 8 or 10 maybe for a January hire. That's still a ways off. It's still back early in the background and stuff like that. So it looks to be improving. It looks like the numbers are coming up, but.
And so while we budget for a vacancy adjustment, trying to level set, we want detention services to be able to get fully staffed. So I just highlight that for, it could be if they're hugely successful and get a lot more staff on, we want them to have a path to. So we'd have to have a budget adjustment somewhere later in 2024 to reflect that. But it's a good thing because then there's some offsetting overtime reduction. So maybe there's not a budget adjustment, but while they have the vacancy adjustment reflected in, they've got the full latitude to continue hiring back to their approved staffing level.
Thank you. Yeah. Next slide. So for our medical services contract, we have 6 months of known. The NAFCARE contract expires June 30th. So included in that 9.8 million is 4.6 million of known potential costs for that period of time. The RFP documentation has been submitted to purchasing and should be starting hopefully anytime. Lieutenant Lehman has been in charge of that and working with Victor and Tony Hall. At this point in time, I've applied approximately 14 to 15% increase to our known 6 months as a projection out. It's honestly a dart at a dartboard for that number until we actually know, number one, what are the providers that are going to be in the RFP, what are the contracts looking like, and you get into the contract process. I discussed with Randy about truing the budget up when we know what the contract is, whether that's plus or minus the 9.8 million that's in the budget currently. That's where we sit today. Any questions on that one? Next slide.
I got a question.
Yes, oh, sure.
Who are the other, and I think I've been told this before, but it's left my brain. Are there other providers in this business?
There are other ones. Every time we go to a conference, there's other ones and they change names and they consolidate. So it'll be interesting to see who actually applies at that time, because I know the ones that applied 7 years ago in NAFCARE, a lot of the names are no longer in the business. So it's like CMS was one that was in the running for the RFP back then. So I'm not exactly sure who's in that arena, but like I said, if you go to a law enforcement or corrections conference, it's like half of the conference is medical providers. It's big business right now.
And When was the initial contract put in for NavCare? Is this the first time it's coming up for?
Correct. It was
Okay.
8 years, I believe.
Yeah, it was a 7-year contract, but I think the first 6 months were like an interim. We just did an emergency contract for 6 months to a year, and then they've been last 6.5 years now.
So we don't have like a past increase to compare to for estimate?
They do 5% escalators
It
every
was
year.
3% in the contract, but we are fully anticipating it to go up significantly. What that significance means, I don't know until we start seeing the proposals.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. Inmate food and kitchen supplies. It's $2 million listed as the category together, but primarily it's inmate food. For 2023, we're projecting 1.7 million of expenditures at our current 845 ADP. I've increased it by a slight amount. I believe it was 5 to 6% for an extra 100,000 to 1.8 million. That gets us a little bit of leeway for what we're projecting at potentially another 20 to 40 bodies per day in the facilities if the trend holds on the ADP increases. We're projecting our average cost per inmate per day is $557 for all meals at our current 845. If we leave that same cost with no anticipated food percentage increases, that would get us 885 ADP, which is the higher end of what we're potentially projecting out as additional bodies. If there was a 2.5% cost increase in food, then that gets us to the 865, which is the 20. So it kind of gives us a little bit of leeway depending on where our population goes. Kitchen supplies is relatively minor in the grand scheme of that $2 million, but there is a projected 143 and I bumped it to 150, which is 5%. And that kitchen supplies includes utensils, clamshells, the plates and the bowls and all of the other things that go along with serving the food. Any questions on that one? Okay, next slide, please. And the Geiger facility lease. So this is similar to NavCare, except we only know 1 month worth of actual cost because the current lease expires January 31st. In the prior 5-year contract amendment that we got from 2019 to 2024, they used the 5-year period CPI increase from the start date of the last one to the start date of the new one. And that was, I believe, like 5 or 6%. I ran it for January of 2019 through June of 2023 when I was creating the budget, and that CPI increase was 23% for that time frame.
So we'll see if Commissioner French, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have had some preliminary conversations with Mr. Crowder, and you know, as I've indicated before, this lease is a lease that actually ends up getting approved by FAA. And so ultimately they're the decision makers and the rest of us are just part of the process. But, you know, this was an interim use. This was not meant to be a permanent location. It was an interim use. And so while we are at the end of a 5-year lease, would not be surprised that the next iteration ends up being a 3-year lease with 2 1-year extensions, just so that we can show FAA that we are working to try and close that facility down one way or the other. If we don't show progress, the FAA could come in and just say, we're done, thank you, take care of it, get rid of it, and be done. And they have the authority because it's a non-aeronautical use on aeronautical property. So I just wanted to give you the background on where we're at on that, and thank you.
Thank you. So as far as the budget for 2024, I took our current lease that expires in 24 and applied that 23% increase from the CPI to the current rate, and that gets us to the $38,000 a month. And I believe it's $452,000 for the year, where we were at about 365, 366 prior to. And this is similar to the NAFCare, where there's the potential to true the budget up once we actually get the contract from Geiger to see what the lease looks like and what the dollar amounts are going to be. Other questions, comments? Next slide. This slide shows how we allocate our costs out to our advisory agencies, which are City of the Valley, Airway Heights, Deer Park, Cheney, Liberty Lake, Medical Lake, and juvenile rehab. So this is the methodology in the contract and how we allocate our costs out. So we take our operating budget, the 61.1, we reduce that number by our miscellaneous revenue, budgeted miscellaneous revenue collection, which are all revenues that are not payments that those advisory agencies make to us. That makes sense. So we have included in there Marshall revenue, DOC revenue, commissary sales is in there, and everything in between, and down to work crew. So every other bit of revenue that we collect, other than the payments we receive from those agencies, included in that $9 million. And that leaves us with our net operating budgeted expenditures. And then after that's calculated, we add a maximum of $800,000 to the net budget for our capital contribution or fund balance, which is required per contract to be 2 months worth of budgeted expenditures. So we'll look at our 61.1 million of 24, divide that by 12, multiply it by 2, and that's the fund balance amount that we have to reach before we stop collecting the 800,000. And if it's somewhere in between, then we reduce that 800,000 down to whatever the dollar amount is. It could be $1, it could be anywhere from $1 to 800,000, depending on where our budgeted expenditures end up. The columns, or the graph to the right there, shows our 2022 actual ADP from the other agencies for reference. And that's what we use because it's the last complete year of data that we have to project out how we're going to charge the agencies 1/12 every month in 2024. So for the city of Spokane, we would take that 52.9, multiply it by 10.9%, and then divide it by 12, and that's the amount they get billed every month, a flat amount every month. At the end of the year, we come back and take actual ADP percentages to the actual budget, or not budget, actual expenditures and actual revenue collections, and then true those up. Did they overpay, did they underpay, we refund them, or we charge them more. That's kind of how that works. Any questions on that?
So it's not on a per bed.
It technically is, because that ADP percentage is based on the number of days, right? It's inmate days divided by total days gives you that ADP percentage. Next slide. This slide is just a visual representation of how our funding breaks down. You'll notice that the percentages for those agencies, the advisory agencies, don't match the prior slide, but that's because we've put back the miscellaneous revenue that all included the mental health sales tax on the prior slide. So the top two were not included because those are the miscellaneous revenue reductions on the prior slide. Next slide.
So just to wrap it up, so same thing, we're continue working on recruiting efforts, trying to fill all the positions, or just get as close as we can, reduce the overtime, reduce the mandatory overtime. Housing, jail overcrowding, that's actually the biggest issue we're dealing with, almost as big or just as big as staffing. Last week we were on red light on Monday for 6 or 8 hours. Tuesday, the same thing, just not having a single available bed. And so Director Sparkman and I have been talking about that a lot. You know, obviously moving forward into 2024, bed space is going to continue to be an issue. Some of the few things that we can affect is the contract agencies like DOC and USM, if at some point we'll have to reduce their numbers. So, and that obviously reduces revenue coming from that side. With that being said, we just signed DOC contract last week for a 5% increase. And then we're currently working on and getting close to signing the US Marshal contract. And we're looking at, it's a bigger increase than that. I think it's around $20 a day increase, whatever. You have the percentage on that, Bryce?
Not a percentage, but we're anticipating them to offer us approximately $140 versus the $122 that it is currently. And a little bit of kind of clarification on the US Marshal contract is it doesn't expire unless we expire it. It allows us to resubmit our cost data the current one was 36 months, which opened up July 31st, I believe. And we submitted our cost information in June. So we were ahead of it a little bit. They did shut down and put a freeze on until October 1st, like 3 days after we submitted our cost information. So we think that's what the delay is. But we have been in contact with their headquarters back in Washington, D.C. with questions.
One of the other things we're working on this contract was we've been trying to work on for years is get US Marshal inmates that would classify it with our classification system, that 9 classification. They've always been overridden to a medium class classification. And so all US Marshals are housed downtown right now. We look at the population, and last time we looked, of the 90, about 40 would actually classify and be able to be housed at a Geiger, and that would help us with our red light and everything else. And so we asked them to inspect Geiger. They did that, and that's part of the holdup too, we believe. So
I have a question on the DOC contract. So you said a 5% increase. Is there a reason why it wasn't 6? I mean, we know.
So yes, they are limited by their budget at 5%. So the state approved budget caps them at 5% max.
So any discussions that they need to adjust their budget for the future?
We did mention that to them. Their comment was, well, that's what the state is capping them at. But we did.
But along with that, there's also an increase for, based on their medical condition, so that we can recoup some of the medical costs that go along with it. That was built into the contract as well, so that helps on that front. Doesn't even balance it out, but it makes it a little bit more, palatable for some of those people that come in. And then also, if you could bring up the fire marshal stuff, Jason, that we met with the fire marshals this week or this last month.
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation, but the fire marshals are looking at some required upgrades to Geiger that we're processing through right now. We're trying to get a beat on what that would look like. The most pressing one, we need to add some fire doors in the hallways, so we're out getting contracts, getting architects involved and figure out what that would look like. And then we'll be able to present something when we're able to get some fine tuning. But this has all just come down in the last couple of months, so we're just trying to backtrack to see what it would cost. Again, it's adding money into Geiger, but we're going to set a deadline at some point to have this implemented. So we'll prepare a packet to come back before the board to talk about what that looks like.
Just a comment if there are no other questions for them.
I just had a comment. I was looking, Mike, at a slide from one of your May presentations, and it had said in the fine print there, Geiger A1 and 2 closed due to lack of officers. I think that may have contributed to some confusion in my mind. So just to let you know, I appreciate your clarification.
Okay.
So I don't know if you still use that slide when you talk to people, but
At the time, we did close them to shift the staff downtown to
there's
cover
just some
overtime.
context, right, about when and what's the current situation is. So.
But right now, they don't have enough eligible people to go out there. That's really the burning thing. So, and then I would point a clarification, Commissioner Kurt, that was 21 for the Blake decision. I think there was some legislative things that were occurring during 2021 that we were looking at for law enforcement, but it was during that period right there.
So Don and others have mentioned the continued jail overcrowding, the red light status. So Mike's been working on what we're calling kind of a jail capacity evaluation to share with the commissioners. I think it'll be ready anytime for an upcoming meeting after the end of this week. And I know Commissioner French has also asked for what does that 5-year plan look like in between, depending on the outcome of Measure 1, what does the next 5 years look like? And given the trends that we're seeing, the additional felonies that are continuing to grow in our jail, the lack of eligible people to go at Geiger, our continued issues with Geiger from a facility capital standpoint, I think it's timely to have a conversation with the commissioners to walk through what the capacity plan is. It'll go into a little more detail as to what Don and Bryce and Jim talked about today, or Jason, sorry, as far as kind of all our other contracts, right? What are we statutorily required to house in our jail? And then what all of our contract agencies are. And those contracts are really based on capacity that we have to be able to manage those. So we'll dive down a little bit more into those details, and there likely is going to be some decision points. I wouldn't say likely, there are going to be some decision points that we've got to make coming forward, and which ones are out first as that capacity continues to be more and more pushed and stretched.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you for that summary, Mr. Simmons. And I think I've said this in previous meetings that, from my standpoint, the hierarchy is U.S. Marshals, GOC, and then we start looking at the municipalities. And so, I know that that's going to have an impact on our revenue for the year, but, we cannot continue to be in a red light status and putting people out into the community that really should be kept from them. So I just wanted to share that observation with fellow commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That's all we have.
That's all.
That's it. That's all.
That's all we got.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. We're stuck. Me and Ron.
We don't use any of those slides anymore. Those are just old slides. Yeah. Never being presented, not being presented.
Geiger A1 and 2 closed due to lack of.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? We're good. Thank you for having us.
We can
Yes,
talk
thank
later,
you for
but
being here. Sorry, we're just a little late, so we'll go ahead and get you guys going. Everyone has a copy of the PowerPoint? If you do, all right. Brought all my luggage with me. How many trees did I kill this morning? That's right. Thank you, Ron, for being our commander down there. At the end of the presentation, I will pass out to you all. I have a business plan copy for you to have as well. I provided Victoria a copy for Commissioner French. Again, my name is Erin Gertel. I'm the director of the Fair and Expo. This is Bill Johnston, our finance person. He's made this appearance with me here before. And yeah, we've had the pleasure of doing a deep dive into the big picture of the Fair and Expo over the last year. And it's been very eye-opening. It's something that hasn't been done before at this level. We've had some great guidance from Scott and Doug on this project. So we'll just dive right into this. Today, we're gonna just give you an overview of our operations, our facility, our users, our operational history. We're gonna dive in a bit to this business plan and touch on our financials.
And capital planning, as we know, it's very important to be planning for our future. The mission statement is a heavy one, so I'm going to let you view that at your own leisure. But really just talking about our agricultural history, educational opportunities, bringing the community together, bringing businesses together to showcase, and creating a family friendly environment for people to enjoy at the Fair and Expo. The next slide, please. We have 15 full-time employees. And so there's 6 in our office, and we have 9 maintenance workers. At fair time, we bring on over 200 workers to make the fair happen. And we are fortunate to have a number of those that return on an annual basis. So I think they're having fun out there, so that's good. Next slide. There's just a lovely overview of our 97 acres. It's amazing what goes on out there. Next slide, please. Again, we have 14 buildings on that property. We have 150,000 plus square feet of exhibit space, 3,000 square feet of meeting space, 4 arenas, including our grandstand that seats 5,200, 199 horse stalls. I don't know why we couldn't get to 200. I really wasn't involved in that. Beautiful outdoor lawn space that, you know, we do spend a lot of time and energy maintaining that. Ample restrooms throughout our facility, some limited shower facilities available as well, and an RV park. We see over 450,000 visitors annually. So that's pretty good. Our next, I've just highlighted here, such a wide variety of events. We really have something almost every weekend, often weekends with 2, 3, 4 different activities. So hopefully you've been out to enjoy one of our events or many throughout the year in addition to the fair. So again, there's a list for you to reference. We'll dive into our operational history. In 1886, the first fair was held in Spokane in Corbin Park. It moved around to a number of other locations before establishing itself at our current facility in 1950 at Broadway in Havana. In 1991, we started operating as an enterprise fund. Now we get to the good stuff, as Doug says. We are going to talk to you about our financial planning and the in-depth analysis that we have put together. We worked on looking at 2018 through 2022 at our actual numbers and did some projected work on 2023 and 2024. And with this, we were able to identify and understand our financial trends. And we took into anomalies. There's a lot of unique scenarios that happen at our facility. But this is going to help us in making decisions as we chart our course moving into the future. So Ron, if we could go to the next slide, please. That one, thank you. What we found is that operationally, we know that the Spokane County Fair and Expo Center, we budget very carefully. We're an enterprise fund. We've always been very conservative in what we do, maybe almost to a fault. But we do end each year with a positive balance ranging from $300,000 to $700,000 annually. This does not include capital equipment and improvement projects. So there's not a lot extra left there, but we'll get into that. Overall, our positive balance comes from the fair. So those 10 days are very important to us and to our livelihood. Again, our average balance is usually about 400,000 plus each year. So for our analysis, next slide, please. For our analysis, we broke our facility out into 5 areas, and we've color coded it. So the expo complex being the main set of buildings you come out to for the RV show or any of the major events. Our ag complex to the north in green, our arenas are highlighted in orange, And then our lawns and parking areas are highlighted in yellow. And then our campground is highlighted in purple. So this is where I'm gonna turn this over to Bill to talk a little bit more about our numbers.
So on the next page, starting with 2018, it showed that roughly we brought in $4.4 million in revenue, and the expenses were a little over $4 million. And we continue that along, and that we were adding to our beginning fund or our cash fund each year. When I first started in 2005, we were in hundreds of thousands of dollars, not where we were. We built that up. By the end of 2019, we were just under $2 million. And then COVID hit. And that's where you can see that stark drop. Virtually had no income, obviously. We did try to do a few things to bring in some revenue. 2020, we basically, we got a little bit of money from some shows that started the year. We actually held a drive-through for a fair for the food vendors. Got smoked out on one time, a couple days, but we tried to make, a little bit of money. We cut back as much as we could. Almost all the staff had to either take paid time off or we laid off some people. And we just were, basically tried to operate at a bare minimum. But the facility as a whole has to still be taken care of. So there were expenses that occurred. 2021, we came in again just below. We had revenue of 2.9 million and expenses a little over 3.2 million. And we also got a cash infusion from the general fund of about $2 million. 1 million was to help kind of offset the prior expenses that we incurred. I don't know if you know, we had emergency management out there. They were storing the PPE stuff and all that other stuff. So, and then we had the health district out there that was using it for a drive-through testing station and that kind of stuff. And then we also, the second million that we received, we were really hesitant about putting on a fair, but it was requested that we put it on, and so the general fund was able to provide us with some money because we didn't know how it was going to turn out.
We were extremely conservative on the fair in 2021. And we were still under restrictions, so there's masking and social distancing in place. Yeah, we pulled it off. We feel good about it. Moving forward, right, Bill?
Yep. And so now in 2022, moving forward, now we are back on the track of where we are making a profit. We are working our way to building up that cash flow balance. So again, projected for 2022, we actually had a really super good fair. We did really a tremendous amount. And that's where we end up coming in, where we made a profit of $700,000 overall for the complex. The fair itself was over $1 million. The interim side, which is anything but fair. So anything other than those 10 days of fair, it's called interim. And in 2022, we had some shows still canceling because of COVID. We lost some shows because they didn't survive COVID. So we were gradually still building that up. And interim as a whole does not show a profit, but a lot of the expenses get directed to the interim side. Fair itself doesn't pay the fairgrounds a rent like a lot of other, because we're our own promoter at that point. And if it was another show, we'd be receiving some income. Of course, the insurance and all that kind of stuff run through the interim side. 2023, we projected to be again about $500,000. I don't have all the bills in from fair. Still don't even have them all received yet. So I don't know where we're going to come in at. And then in 2024, again, is the projection. We should come in around the $400,000 mark. So next slide. So when we look at Aaron had mentioned about the different areas, and we budget, so the Ag Expo buildings themselves for non-fair time, that's where the complex as a whole makes money on that part of the buildings. We lose money per se on the ags and the arenas because they just can't generate enough to cover all the expenses per se. We're working towards that. We've learned, again, off of this analysis, we've learned we were being a little bit too low on the building rental rates and that kind of stuff. And then at fair time, it kind of flips the A complex or the Expo complex side. It doesn't make money because there's not very much goes on there. We have the commercial vendors, but it's for showing of exhibits and that kind of stuff. So the revenue isn't there. Big money maker at fair time is obviously the carnival food area, which is considered part of the lawns, and then the arenas because of the concerts. So it kind of all flips when it comes to looking at different fair time versus non-fair time. And then, so now we're looking at.
And I think just, highlighting the slide that's up, and you touched on that, Bill, is that, we look at our business in two pieces, the non-fair business and then the 10 days of fair. So, but it all comes together as one in the end. If you want to go to the next slide, please.
So this here, it shows the non-fair portion of it. And it shows, again, that the revenue levels are less than the income or expense levels. And now the key thing is, again, because fair didn't happen in 2021, or 2020, in 2021, you see that we had expenses of 1.3 million, almost 1.4 million, and we barely had 400,000 of revenue. So we lost $1 million. So that all those years of building up the fund balance quickly went away. And actually, before we got that first $1 million from the general fund, we were back basically down to the last $200,000 that we had in our name.
We sound doom and gloom. We're not really trying to.
Yeah.
We came out of it, but it does paint the picture of what we've been through.
And then again, when we did start having the fair and last year, because we had a super good fair, the fund balance looks a lot better than it was, but we're still barely at right around $2 million. So again, recently we had to come up with, or we had our HVA system in phase 2 and 3, and that project currently is at $4.5 million. And those are the kind of things that we can support ourselves for the daily operations. It's the big capital outlays right now that we're struggling to try to come up with plans and ways to fund those. Again, in here in your plan, in the business plan that we're going to provide you at the end, it kind of explains a lot of that. But if you have any questions on this, again, on the interim side, it just shows that we still, even though we're back going, back in business and whatnot, the interim side is currently where it loses some money. And the fair, the 10 days, that is the big thing. If we struggle if we have a bunch of rain or we get a bunch of smoke or whatever happens to be, that could impact us for the next year, because then our fund balance just doesn't grow as much as it should.
So, Ron, if we could just fast forward a few slides. I think Bill covered everything really nice there. And we'll talk about, and Bill touched on it, just, the operational challenges that we face or can face. Definitely non-fair pandemics, canceled events downsizing the number of buildings used, events reducing the number of event days. For example, the boat show used to be a 10-day show. Right now it's at a 4-day. So we're looking forward and hoping that they can rebuild and get closer to those 10 days. But those are the things that are in flux for us all of the time, that promoters may come to us and say, hey, it didn't sell as well as we had hoped. And we try to work with our events, but sometimes, we obviously have to look out for our finances as well. But we are fortunate that most of our events are with us annually, and we have a long history with them. I'm just touching on the fair, like Bill said, weather, rain, smoke, wind. It might have even been a little bit too warm this year on the last Saturday. We heard a lot of people were out boating, and we felt that rush come to the fair at like 3 o'clock on, instead of first thing in the morning we would feel on the second Saturday. Again, pandemics, we were really touched by that. Animal disease outbreaks, sometimes we don't have certain animals able to exhibit at the fair because of that. All of that impacts our attendance, our admission ticket sales, our carnival food and alcohol sales, which we get a commission on all of those, our grandstand event ticket sales. I will say also, there's a lot of competition in Spokane for booking concerts and events right now. And the artists are asking for more money. I see Northern Quest is already announcing their lineup for next summer. So we're getting on it as well right now. Amount of commercial vendor space sold. We saw a lot of vendors impacted by the pandemic that went out of business. People are still having staffing issues. 10 days is a long time to staff a booth at the fair. So working through that, but we did get up to almost 100% on booth solds this year. So that was great. Parking, again, that is a big expense and can be impacted by a number of attendees and sponsorships. So, but we have a lot of strengths. We're affordable. We are the home of many repeat events I talked about. We have versatile event space. We're centrally located. We have free parking, easy access for move in and move out. And we have really good rapport working with our promoters. That's something we take a lot of pride in. The fair, again, is an annual tradition that the community looks forward to. We're centrally located. We're always the first Friday after Labor Day. Generally, we draw over 200,000 attendees. And we have great long-term relationships with our food vendors and our carnival suppliers, etc. So, for example, our carnival company has been with us over 20 years and wonderful to work with. Ron, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as part of the study, what we did is we evaluated comparative, rates and other venues in our area, other facilities similar to ours. Not all fairgrounds are the same. There are about 70 fairs in Washington State. So we looked at venues that were similar to ours in size, number of events held each year, types of events, and we did a rental rate comparison. And what we found out is we are in line with the venues around the state at about 8 cents per square foot. If you looked at the convention center, which we're not apples to apples, we offer different products, very different locations. They are at 16 cents per square foot. So with this information, we are factoring these increased rental rates into our future planning to try to get those numbers more leveled out, that the fair isn't necessarily carrying the full weight of the profit, and that the interim side is, generating enough to cover its costs to be self-supporting. So it's going to help us make, better decisions moving into the future, having this information, and also really establishing a plan moving forward on adjusting our rental rates. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a rate increase in a number of years. So now that we're out of COVID, these are things that are going to help us move into the future and help us plan for recovering operating costs and creating a capital fund to invest back into our future. And we are proposing for our 2024 rental rates, which I know will segue into that briefly after this, is moving to 9 cents a square foot, so bumping it 1 penny. And that's for the buildings. We've evaluated all of our other rental rates and made some adjustments to keep us more competitive with what's in the market, but also cover our costs. We're on the next slide. So I already went through that one. Let's go to the next one, please. Again, we've also done evaluations on our camping and on our commercial booth space for our fair. So we've got plans in place for that as well. Next slide, please. Parking. We raised our parking to $10 this year at the fair, kept it $5 on Senior Day, and that was well received. Overall, did not have a lot of feedback on parking going to $10. Actually, we found that some people haven't been to the fair in so long, they didn't know we charged for parking. So that was kind of comical to hear. Next slide, please. Just talking about increasing our revenue, which I've already touched on, but now with this base plan and study in place, we can annually reevaluate everything and make adjustments as needed on an annual basis. So that's going to be very positive for us moving forward. With all of this information that we've put together, if we could go to the, you're there, great. Capital planning, that just really is something that hasn't happened, unfortunately, at the Fair and Expo. So we did an in-depth analysis of our whole facility, and we outlined, our needs, wants, our urgent things. And hopefully now that we've put together this list of nearly $27 million in projects, we can have a better handle as we move forward in planning and financially preparing to do that. It's also helping us prioritize what's important and what needs to be taken care of. Working on a multi-year plan, and hopefully we can get ahead of things and they won't be catastrophic for us, like the HVAC and the roof projects. So those are our goals. The next slide, please. Perfect. So just a highlight of some of the 6-year capital projects that we've outlined. Like I mentioned, we came up with about $27 million in capital projects. The last time, we'll get into that, major investment was made in our facility was back in the early 2000s. So the first project we have on our list is building a restroom and shower facility in our campgrounds. I just applied for a grant with the Washington State Department of Ag for $250,000. We should know in the next month or so if we're going to be awarded that. We would then apply those funds towards building a restroom and shower facility. Through this study, we've really seen there's a lot of opportunity in our camping. Again, it's affordable, it's centrally located. We are partnering with Hoop Fest and other events in the area to say, hey, there's camping close by to downtown. And so we really want to grow that program and be able to offer that. Next on our list is coming up with some funding, and our carnival partners interested in doing this with us is where our carnival folks camp during the fair. There's no water or sewer connectivity. They're bringing in, temporary hookups. And with that, we can also branch out and add some more things to our existing campground area that will be helpful. The third item on the list is a fire suppression system and sprinklers for our ag complex. Those buildings are used quite often, and for public safety, those are things that we're going to be looking to need to add. Because when they were originally built, they were for agricultural use. The next item is just talking about repaving Fairgrounds Road. That's our main entrance off of Havana all the way up to our main admission gates. That has become very alligator worn out. We get potholes in there. So there's a lot of traffic, a lot of wear and tear. We're bringing 450,000 guests in a year, and baseball's bringing over a couple 100,000 attendees in the year. It's a really high traffic area for us. And then the last item on the list is looking into paving the south parking lot. People tend to want to park where it's paved when they come to our facility. So it would be nice to be able to enhance that area and upgrade it and balance it out, because when there's baseball going on and our events and everyone wants to park in the main lot because they feel like that's kind of the best lot and the west lot there, it would just help spread some of that out. Next slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit, but historically, capital funding, and what I could find from resolutions on file, at least back to the 1980s, is that the county has been providing us capital funding for projects. I mentioned the last major investment was in the early 2000s with, I think it ended up being closer to 25 million, but that's when we added the grandstand, outdoor food booths, the plaza, Bay 4, and that was the last major investment in our facility. We did receive some funding, the BOCC approved in 2012, and part of that did go to pave the west parking lot in front of Avista Stadium there along Havana. And then the most recent investment being the $4.5 million for the HVAC and roof replacement, phase 2 and 3, which we're hoping to have wrapped up by early December. So that is happening right now. Our next slide. So planning for future capital improvements. Our goal, we feel comfortable, is setting aside $400,000 per year from our budget, allocating $100,000 of that towards equipment. We are driving some really archaic things out there. A lot of our pickups are from the 90s, I believe. And we've been blessed with some new hand-me-downs from Parks, so thank you. But we definitely need to do that. You know, forklifts, backhoes, lifts, I mean, you name it, we have a little bit of everything. So once you take out that $100,000 for equipment, that leaves us with $300,000, which we would utilize about $75,000 per year for small capital projects, leaving us about $225,000 a year towards major capital projects. So of course, in like looking at our restroom shower facility coming at maybe $700,000. So for multi-years, we're gonna need to set that money aside so we can accomplish some bigger things as well. But we're excited to be outlining a path forward and planning for our future. And again, just having this opportunity to really do a deep dive into our organization and have a better understanding of where we sit. And again, just really proud of my staff. And you know, we have just been really conservative in what we do, and we accomplish a lot with our small team and a smaller budget. But you know, you're starting to see the age and wear of our facility, and we do need to be planning for that. The community really looks to us to be a place to gather and hold their events, and we love that. We love being that for our community. So you know, we're just going to be looking at maximizing our use of sustainable and other identified and yet to be identified funding sources to address prioritized needs and wants as we move forward. And then the packet we're going to hand out to you, you can at your own leisure look at that $27 million in projects that, you know, we've outlined and tried to prioritize. But again, those priorities are going to be changing every year, just as we see, you know, our facility aging and different things becoming more urgent. So I know that was a lot of information to throw at you, and we would like to open it up for some questions.
I've got a comment, but I wanted to wait to see if the commission had any questions.
So I guess a couple things I just want to comment on is you guys have done a great job. And we were there through COVID, and you guys really did. I mean, it's like it was devastating. I mean, I think you were one of the departments that we couldn't give CARES dollars to, and so it was like this kind of weird, you know, situation where you guys were doing a lot of work and a lot of effort, but then we couldn't use CARES dollars for that. So, so thank you for all that you've done, and excited that the roof is going to get taken care of. And I would just, I mean, it's like definitely, you know, planning that your capital improvements are going to happen, some of it through you, but just like with parks on the golf courses, the major capital improvements don't happen through, you know, it happens through coming and talking to the commissioners and figuring out where other dollars are. You know, I think we've done some major improvements at the golf courses this last couple of years too. And so even though you're an enterprise fund, it hasn't always been all on the enterprise funds, because golf is an enterprise fund as well. So I think we've got to be realistic in that you're not going to be able to earn enough money to sustain all the capital improvements that need to happen on those buildings. And I think, there's the additional funds that are going to be coming from the refinancing of the bonds that,
1.2.
through the PFD that have to go to another public
It
facility.
has to be
which is
used
what-
it can only be used really at fairgrounds.
Yeah, wonderful. So I think we'll have to, look to what those priorities are and help guide that process, I guess, as commissioners. So as you're identifying what that is, but I'm not sure when we get those funds.
It's April.
Great. So that'll be something that I know, because I think that's probably in some of the past stuff where some of those funds came from.
Yes.
That Commissioner French knows, so he was the one who knew to request that as we were doing
Thank
that
you.
refinancing, so.
I think because there was some from a previous refinance that I think the thing that stands out to me, I think we had remodeled a restroom in one of the main buildings.
Yes.
And then
The
we
parking
wired
lot.
it for Wi-Fi.
Yes.
The Wi-Fi was paid out of that. I want to say that was 2017.
Yeah, I think I noted it as like
Around there?
2016, 2017, and it was like 1.6 million, so yeah, we appreciate that.
So, Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to see a 5-year, 2019 to 2023 income and expense summary and a projection into 24. So if you could provide that, I would appreciate it.
Actually, Commissioner French, on the part of the packet that Victoria has received for you, along with all the capital line listing, we have a thing we've actually predicted out, because in prior meetings we were requested to predict out to 2029. So we did our best guess at how we could do rate increases, what expenditures would be, and then how it was impacted by our capital investment and what we have listed in the next 5 years. So there is a page in here that actually goes all the way out, and it does show where our ending cash balance would be and where we're hoping to get cash income, because obviously the 400,000 a year is not going to cut it for when we go to do, especially that $5 million for the south parking lot, which by then, who knows what it's going to be. So on the back page of this one form that you guys everyone will receive out of the business plan, there is a thing that predicts out all the way out to 2029.
How far back does it go?
2018.
Okay, thank you.
Well, 2018 is in some of the handouts that are in the business plan on different areas. The one that's on the back of the capital things, it starts at 2023 and goes to 2029. So they're not actually on the same page. But we do have documentation in here that does show starting with 2028, going through 2024 in the main body of it, and then the rest it goes through as attached to the capital projects.
So Commissioner French, as you look at that, if you have additional questions, you'll be able to ask Bill or Aaron that.
Please do.
Okay, thank you.
So as Aaron mentioned earlier, the kind of the business plan and the projections either had not been done previously or had not been done in quite some time. So I appreciate her and her team's efforts. We challenge them to really help look at this as it is an enterprise fund. The intent of an enterprise fund is to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, generate enough user rate based fees to cover expenses, including capital. Historically, the commissioners have utilized some of the REAP dollars for it. And we were fortunate enough to use ARP for the very expensive roof replacement HVAC. But I've really challenged Aaron. They need to be staying on top of their rate analysis every year to ensure that they're keeping pace with market, and the users that are paying the revenues are the ones who are covering the maintenance and capital needed out there, not an expansion. Expansion is completely different, but as they're looking at their capital plan, they need to be looking out and making sure they're generating enough revenues over expenses to save for those things. There may be time to time where they do need to come back to the commissioners, have a conversation about REIT and other things, but the challenge I've laid out to them is make sure you're evaluating your business model as a standalone. You're running it as it would be as a standalone business operation that doesn't have any revenues coming from anywhere else. So, but they've done a really good job putting this together and also looking out into a forecast, which gives you those future looks as well.
Any other questions or comments? I believe we are on the agenda to segue into talking about a briefing of our rate increase. So that shouldn't take too much of your time. We did about a 10% rate increase in 2023, and it had been about 7 years since there was a rate increase. So again, through this study and looking at all of our numbers and being more financially sustainable, as I mentioned in the PowerPoint presentation, we need to raise our rates 1 cent per square foot. So going from 8 cents a square foot to 9 cents a square foot. And we have put some of our promoters on notice, but we do need to get a letter out right away as everyone's making plans. And then we went through all of our pricing just to make sure we're in line with what the market is charging. And there were just some areas that we were really undervalued on and we're more competitive on. And also minimum wage plays a lot into what we're doing and adjusting those rates for janitorial, security, etc. So we're still waiting on some numbers from our janitorial company, but that's just always been based on that. So our security. So we feel good about moving forward with that, but wondered if you had any questions on rental rates and increases. Okay. Guess that includes our entertaining portion of your day. We'll hand out a few of these business plans so the commissioners have these for reference. Please reach out with any questions. Bill and I are always available if you want to come out and meet, or we're happy to come to you, and we will cuddle up with that over next weekend, maybe some hot cocoa or something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, great job at the fair. You guys ended well.
We did. I believe I'll be back next week to talk about fair.
Oh, there we go.
So,
Okay.
yeah. It'll be light and fluffy. It was a good fair.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill.
Absolutely.
Commissioner? Well, Doug's here too. He's doing the same thing with the golf course as well. They just had their golf advisory committee meeting last week. He'll be coming with golf rates for recommending, and he's setting the same kind of tone and tenor. It's like, we gotta start planning for these things within our golf rates. And there may be an occasion where they need to come back for some requests, but they're planning the same thing. So I appreciate the fact that he's kind of resetting that expectation to ensure those future investments are sustained within the golf course funds as well.
Okay, Randy and Tessa, looks like it's now your turn.
Good thing it worked that time. Okay, so for the budget today, a couple of things we wanted to go over, and part of this relates to capital planning. We want to end up at capital planning. When we talked 2 weeks ago, we talked about the interest income and some other one-time monies, which equaled about $10 million. And currently the budget had a collections over expenses of 760. So it's gonna give us about 10,760,000 to put towards capital. You had a presentation a couple weeks ago from the clerk's office where they had requested an additional judgment clerk, thank you. If we do that, we need to take that out of course the 760. So we would need a decision on that before we really know how much we have for capital. We also forwarded to you some details on outside agencies a couple weeks ago where it had, what the history had been from 21 and 22, what the 23 budget was, what we have built into this budget for 24. So again, if we want to do increases, there were a number of requests for increase to current funding levels. If we want to do that, we need to take that also out of the 760. And lastly, sales tax. When we put this budget together, we had just gone through 4 months and then 2 good months, and we were running at 2.9% year over year. Last month came in at 0.1% year over year, so that dropped our year to date to 2.7. We just got the forecast this morning from the state. We don't have actual numbers, but they are showing about a 1.6% decrease year over year for the month of August, which we will receive this October. So looking at that, I believe we have probably overshot the mark. If you read the news, things like that, we probably won't end the year at 2.9, which means we're probably $1 to $2 million over estimated in our collections for 24 for sales tax. So that would take our 760 into a negative amount, plus anything we do with outside agencies, plus what we do with the judgment clerk. Thank you. I will remember that someday. So again, that would give us the jump off point. I don't know if we can make some decisions today on some of those items, so we can have we know how much money we have going toward capital. You know, if we have a negative, or I don't like using one-time monies to fund ongoing operations, which means we would either have to find other savings in the budget, or we would have to use fund balance to use that. I prefer not using one-time monies to keep operations going, because that's not sustainable. So comments, thoughts on judgment clerk, outside agencies, other areas that you would like to do to maybe make a balanced budget before we get into capital?
So I apologize because it's not in our packet for today.
No, I know.
So
This is very fluid. I apologize for, we were hoping to have this information Friday and it didn't come until today,
So I guess I'm trying to figure out, it's needing to see, so you think we're gonna end up in a budget deficit for last year?
I do now. I do now. Right now, I would say sales tax is, if we end up at just 2% over year, when we were at 2.7 at the end of last month, we will have a collection shortfall of about $750,000 for sales tax for 23.
Okay.
And that will grow to about $1.5 million for 24 if we assume the same 2% growth. If we assume less growth.
So 2023, we're estimating like $750,000 deficit.
If I will have about $750,000 shortfall in revenue from sales tax. Doesn't mean we'll be in a deficit, but we will have a shortfall in sales tax revenue.
Okay.
Which will give me a lower jump off point going into 24 budget.
Right. But we don't, so what we don't know is, so we had contracts that got finalized. We had estimated some, we had some.
I would say right now, there is enough in the contingency to cover the 23 shortfall in sales tax.
Okay.
I don't see 23 as the issue.
Okay. And in 23, we didn't do the vacancies adjustments either.
We did do vacancy adjustments in 23.
Okay,
In addition to that, we did set up some contingency money for the contracts that were not yet finalized.
okay. And then in 2024, we know what the contracts are, we know what the dollars are that way. You're just trying to project the now, what the sales tax dollars are.
Correct, because when we put this budget together, we're using our latest available information, and we were assuming that 23 would be 2.9% higher than 22, which would give us the jump off point for the 23-4 calculation, which is what our budget was.
Just for sales tax.
Yes, just for sales tax.
And so what do you think now, today?
Today,
Now,
if
think that-
So that 1 point, it depends on where our numbers come out, and we won't know that until next week. But I would anticipate we will be 1 to 2 million less in sales tax than what we currently have in our 24 estimated budget. If 23 is 2% higher than 22, and 24 is 2% higher than 23, that's $1.4 million of sales tax that we will not get in 24 that we currently have in the budget. If those percentages go down to 1.5%, that's how you get to the $2 million figure. So if 23 ends up 1.5% higher than 22, and 24 the same, it's $2.1 million less sales tax in 24 than we currently have in the 24 projection. So it's a big swing. And I mean, these numbers, and I'm saying it's gonna be $1 to $2 million right now. That I think our 24 budget has more revenue in it than we will likely get based upon the most recent results.
I think that's what we were just trying to get
Yes.
at, as well as, you think the anticipated growth from year to year in sales tax is 2.9, but now it's gonna be less.
It's gonna be less than that.
So-
We budgeted based on 2.9, it will be less than that, I believe.
What we've so far budgeted.
Yes,
So what do we think, what do you think the realistic percentage is on sales tax?
Changes every month, right?
it changes every month. I believe we will be short.
No, not what you're short. What do you think? So it's not you don't think it's gonna be 2.9%. What percentage do you think you should realistically put it at?
I think I should do 2%, which is 1.4 less than we currently have in the budget.
That's why I'm just trying to get to those two numbers, is that you think it'll be a 2% gain in the next year, but based on what you've already estimated for 24
That
and
we
how
would have
people
to reduce
project,
that by
then we're down
1.4 million.
1.4. Okay, Commissioner French?
Yes, Mr. Bishop, I really appreciate the fact that now I have finally heard the other shoe hit the floor. As you and I have talked, all the indicators are indicating a softening. I look at sales tax projections that we're seeing at STA and other agencies, and I agree with you 100%. And so it's now a matter of trying to predict how bad. And I think your 2% is probably a good number to shoot for based upon what we know right now. So, but I'm just glad the shoe didn't land on top of me, but I did hear it drop real close to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't know how you want to proceed, but the first iteration of the budget only had a $760,000 cushion. This $1.4 million would take that to a deficit of about $640,000. We also have, as I said, we have the request from the clerk's office for a judgment clerk, which I believe the cost on that fully loaded is, Tessa knows.
55.
Is that fully loaded?
5.
Okay, so let's call it 60. I don't like round numbers like that, so that would take us to about 700,000. 761, 460, yeah, okay. 700,000, and then anything that we did in outside agencies that would add to that. So to get to a balanced budget, we would either have to cut additional costs by that amount or use fund balance to sustain that for a short period.
Commissioners, we're going to talk about, towards the end of this, the need to have a couple more budget workshops. There's obviously a lot of fluid things happening with, are we going to recession, are we not? What's the impact on sales taxes? It is a very fluid conversation. So I think what I would propose is based on what looks to be a softening of sales tax revenues, we go back and reflect a revised budget, because we gave it to you at the beginning of September and things have changed. We know more now. We show a 2% sales taxes. We need to strip out some of these excess travel that was built into the budget that we shouldn't have let be built in. And that'll give us maybe $500,000 or more that we can use to offset it. And a couple other things that we would identify for some opportunities, including maybe the judgment clerk being in there. So why don't we go through it and make some recommendations on things that we would change. You can see it visually and see what the, even do a sensitivity. If 2%, then sales tax would be this. If 1.8, if 2.2, that sort of stuff. So as we get closer to the end of the year and we see where sales tax is landing, is it still trailing down? Is it starting to level up? We can have something visually for you all to look at, because I know there's a lot of numbers and a lot of moving parts. It's hard to just share in terms of direct feedback without knowing, okay, if you do this, well, what's the change on the rest of it? So we can pull that together and have it in one of our upcoming budget sessions.
Commissioner Waldron.
And then I think that would be great, Scott. That would be really helpful. And then I guess I was just circling back, Madam Chair. Did we follow up with the health district to see if funds that came from the county that could be mental health sales tax funds? Anyway, just another thought.
Yeah.
I know that most of their funds that come in, their specific programs, including the opioid treatment program, but I think that they had a little bit of extra in there. I don't know, just another thought that if there's any way that they could rework the budget so that if there are eligible costs for mental health sales tax, maybe that would be, a couple $100,000, but it might help.
So I know Lola and Justin have met, but based on the budget that I saw and when Kevin and I were talking about it, and I mean, we all have the budget now, ours are the local dollars that they use to match for other grant opportunities, and different things that would not be eligible, I don't think, through the mental health sales tax, because it's really that general, it's kind of their general fund is what our money is for them. So it's really the local dollars that they can attach to other things. So I'm not sure that I think they've looked for that opportunity, but I don't think that there is that opportunity. And so again, they're at like $2,032,000. I think it's just over 2 million is what the request is. So, but I can check with Lola again to see if there is any other opportunities. But I think they have discussed that. And
So the other question then, to come back with options, outside agencies, do we leave it at the same dollar amount that we currently have, that we carried over from 23? You do have a number of requests for additional funds. Do we increase that number when we come back with a round two of the,
so I think, we should see what the additional requests are. I mean, because there are certain groups that I think were requested to put in for additional funds. So we haven't even seen that yet. So we need to.
they're all in your booklets, under tab.
Okay.
There's a new one.
There's an
There is
additional
one more
request,
that we
okay.
will circulate, yeah.
All right, we'll get the additional request out. They are in, what tab test?
Think tab 20.
20 is the outside agencies, but,
Their applications are later in that section.
okay. But as to additional asks that have come in after we receive these binders.
There's only
Right,
been
there's
one, and
one
we will,
more.
Oh,
we
is that
will
all?
route that to
Only
you.
one. Okay.
Okay. And in our binder, I apologize that I had not gone through it in detail.
I understand.
Do we have kind of a summary by department of full-time employees?
Yes,
And where that has gone from year to year?
yes, from 21 through the 24 budget.
Thank you. Where would I find that?
It's
It should be in the very front cover, before you even get to a tab.
It's been a little while since I've gone through it, so.
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
For me, it's like, we've got to figure out where, we've got to balance the budget, so we've got to figure out where we're at. And we knew with the, with the contracts that occurred, that
Right, it will,
we've either got to find some efficiencies or, we're not going to be able to afford everything going
that
forward.
is correct. The people is in, as your binder, first it's the financial, just the raw, and then it's the people right after that in each section. So we will wait to hear from that. We'll put some suggestions together as we get, Tessa will send out that, the request we received since we put in this budget. She'll send that out today. But yeah, as we can put together scenarios, but we will leave outside agencies flat. And so that would just be a change that we would then need to come up with additional savings if you award, I think the children's waiting room they had an additional request in there over the 83 they got this year. We'll let you go through that. With that, we can start talking about capital. Basically, we would still have the 10 million of one-time funds. We have, and we will, can you email this maybe to Amber and Al right now? We've put together just some suggestions for you. Again, the top million does say 10,740,000. We would reduce that to 10. But we also did not allocate $1 million of it because of the sales tax potential. And we've added a couple other lines across the top. We added grants. We also added bond proceeds. For example, like the Green Buildings Act. The thought there would be, instead of using cash to necessarily pay for the 15 to 20 million, whatever we need for that, we would use the savings that we actually get to use that to pay debt, instead of using cash for that. Because we're gonna have savings in the future, use that savings to pay back the loan, basically. Also, if we ever had, if a new detention facility were to take place, we know we would be borrowing for that and have a payment revenue stream for it to come from before we did that. So this was under the general fund column. This is how we, some suggestions we have on how to allocate that $10 million or most of it. So if you would, if you have things that you would like us to change, please let us know. The clerk, again, most of that stuff is maintenance stuff, so we wanted, that should have really been in the maintenance budget. But it is, some of it does have to be capitalized because it's over $5,000. Detention services, the big one we didn't fund is the jail remodel, because you gave that to them for 23, but they couldn't do it because they don't have any space. So there's no space to move the inmates to actually refurbish a floor. So, this is one of those deferred maintenance things that we've got looming over us because we physically don't have a place to put the inmates to redo a floor. So we are just adding to deferred maintenance. So until we get a new facility or a place to put them, we're gonna have another, we're gonna have to go back to fix those things. So those are a lot of the big ones that we did not put in there. For Fair and Expo, we'll work with Aaron, but again, as Mary said, we have the 1.2, it's about 11273 that we will be getting from the PFD for the credit enhancement. Of course, they can use that. So like the shower upgrades, they've applied for the $250,000 in a grant. It's a $700,000 project. They could use, I would have them allocate $450,000 of that 1.2 million to finish that, primarily because it can only be used at the fairgrounds. That's the only place it can be used. So, and we can go through there. They had a second one. We moved up their 26th request ahead of their 25 request, but we will work with Aaron to see if that 100,000 is more important than the sprinkling system in the building. So we will meet with her on that. So any questions, comments as you look through that list?
I'll make a comment if I could, Commissioner. So the top section is all the potential funding sources. If your budget binder, when you look at REIT 1 capacity, REIT 1 fund balance, REIT 2, those directly tie back to what the budget team has identified for kind of available spending if we try to keep around three or so million each of those fund balances in the out years. So that's where those numbers come from, if you're wondering. And then we certainly will have to have a in-depth conversation with the commissioners on opportunities for bonding as we think about multiple borrowing needs probably coming together at a similar time frame. Maybe advantageous for us to look to consolidate these things all at one point in time. And then, of course, we'll be identifying sources of funds to be able to service that debt as well. As Randy mentioned, savings from energy to be able to invest in our 12-7 compliance requirements that are coming at us.
So we don't need answers on this, but this is kind of give you some ideas. Think about it.
And our exec team went through this last week and kind of put together these recommendations based on kind of where we knew the needs were at. Just our recommendations, give you something to react to. We do have some monies going towards juvenile to help some of their interim needs or immediate needs. So we tried to sprinkle it out a little bit so that we could give a variety of departments some care and attention.
Okay, Commissioner French, and then I'll go to Commissioner Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So refresh my memory, Mr. Simmons, on the capital funding matrix, the top row, bond proceeds, 27 million. Yeah, right there. What is that from?
There's 3 identified uses on here. One would be towards the 1257 compliance for our facilities. That's about 5 million. Another 4 initially towards the Law and Justice Center, and then the Public Works facility over reconfiguring Wilbert Vault to build that out. That has identified dollars for being able to fund some of it on the front end, but right now it's those are the kind of the 3 sources or 3 identified needs for potential a bond offering in the future.
So that's not a bond that's issued, that's a bond potential.
Potential, correct.
That is
correct. Yes, that would be a forecasted bond offering.
And Al, that bond would actually be higher than the 27 million because the full Green Buildings Act is we're going through that energy audit, but that's going to be 15 to 17 million, 18 million. And once we know that number, we would know what to put into a bond offering there. Kyle's building at 18 is probably pretty close. Again, any other bond offerings that are listed in there, that is not the full amount for those things. So the bond offerings would be larger than that, but that's where we would anticipate paying for those projects from.
Why does it say helicopter 2 million 2024? Is that, I thought it was less our share.
That
over
is
time.
the full amount without any charge back to Spokane Valley.
Why would we not have a charge back to the valley?
I don't believe the valley would pay upfront. That would be part of their annual chargeback, I believe, is my understanding.
More of a depreciated lease cost to finance. From a use perspective is how we handle more of our major assets with the valley on a case-by-case basis.
Thought the payments didn't start till 25.
They may and may not. I do know
Thought that's what
that
we were told pretty clearly.
Cal Helicopter did come back to Chief Ellis, and apparently somebody has not taken delivery of a helicopter, so we have the potential if we want to. It has not come back to you yet, so I'm putting in 24. It may be 25, that's up to you guys. But there is the potential we could get a helicopter in 24 is my understanding, if that is what you so desire.
And there's multiple decision points, Commissioner Jordan. There's the purchase price that they've shared with us, what the public auction would yield for our surplus helicopter, what the results of continued grant funding is. I believe we have $500,000 that's been earmarked from the federal.
And they've applied for another quarter million.
So that number, and then if we finance or pay for it outright, and then how do we look at the future recovery of that through the Valley's contract as well? So it's a soft number right now because it's fluid, as many of our other numbers are, but all based on kind of decision points that have not been made yet. We know some things, but we don't know everything yet. So it may not be a full 2 million. It may actually be less than 2 million. We could borrow. We could cash fund.
We could put it on a lease and pay the lease. There's a lot of options yet. This is if you cash out worst case scenario. And if we did it in 24, not 25.
Yeah, because I'm I mean, that was my memory, that it was all
Yes,
25.
it was gonna be
but
January of 25.
You're putting the
I'm
order
putting
in.
it in 24 just in case you want to do it. You don't have to do it. We can put it out to 25, no doubt.
And
Apparently, we now have an option.
there is a deposit that is required
Yes.
per the proposed contract. I believe it's 10%, something like that.
And I think that's even fluid a little bit now based on my last hearings. It may not be any, but it was $500,000, yes.
What was $500,000?
The deposit was $500,000, which would be the money they got from
The grant
the grant.
from the feds.
Right. Basically, the deposit was equal to the federal grant.
And I guess on Public Works, I thought there was, they haven't figured out on the funding.
For their building, their
Yes.
their plan is to issue debt and pay it back over a period of about 10 years or something like that, before they took on the next project. They have one, their latest one ends in 23, it'll be paid off. And so then they would use that debt service and roll that into their next project, which would be this. The other thing you could do to pay it off quicker is if you did a levy shift, of course. You could help pay that building down. But this is assuming that they would have to borrow the full project and start with the debt service they're currently using and roll that into this project.
I believe, if I recall, they had funds to be able to only have to borrow 11 million for the building. That's the number I recall from the last plan they had showed. They had surplus property. They had some a previous road levy shift they had set aside for this. So I think it was down to 11 million. So you might want to just show 11 million on this one,
All right.
Randy.
Okay, we'll change that.
That was my recollection, that it wasn't the full, I mean, and the costs have gone up, because I think it was originally 12 million, and then costs have gone up, but, yeah, I guess I want to be realistic as to what that was versus what we were
I was off on that one.
assessed as well.
Thank you for that clarification.
And was there talk of using the treasurer's office to,
There's lots of talks. It could be there, it could be private placement with a banking facility. It all depends on rates.
And willingness.
yes,
I think we've anticipated to have to go, if we don't bundle this with a future bond offering, I think there was an anticipation that we would use a local bank to see what kind of rates they would provide us. We'd love to be able to borrow from the treasurer's office if they would be willing to.
I got a quick question. I'm just letting folks know I'm a little surprised to hear there's a down payment on the helicopter. I just thought we were told there wasn't, but maybe I misunderstood.
That's what our understanding was as well.
Okay.
That's what was shared, I believe, in here.
And the latest
And
information.
I get that it's flexible too.
And the
so.
latest information I have heard is that Bell apparently would be willing to go to zero, but what I have in writing is $500,000.
The 20 patrol vehicles, is that referencing when they came in a couple weeks ago and said, hey,
Yes.
let's place the order, it can be subject to
Yes,
change?
this is assuming you funded the full amount of when they came in 2 weeks ago. Because they had to place the order by today or something like that. So yes, this is assuming you fund that full thing for those vehicles, yes.
And the 14 from the Valley, they pay for that
They pay for that
themselves?
directly. The Valley started that last year, where they are paying directly for their cars so that if they were to ever not use the sheriff's office, they would own those vehicles.
Oh, and that's hence the special revenue?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I guess then we will come back to you next time with some different multiple options based upon sales tax, how to zero out that budget. If you could also think about for the outside agencies and their requests in the back of your budget, booklet, excuse me, if you need additional budget monies included for that, that would be helpful, or we will come up with some contingency monies to cover some of those potentially. And then just please review the capital. My understanding is we were originally scheduled for the next time to be in 2 weeks from today, but my understanding is we may not have before. Is that correct?
Correct. So when we were looking, Amber's online and Josh has left, but at the health district, we have to do interviews and we have to have a day for interviews for the new executive director as we do that. And so we had all looked at our calendars and there was nothing on the 30th at that point in time. So this was a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So there was nothing on the calendar at that point in time. So we said, okay, let's just book that day. So the three of us will be busy with
When
interviews.
would you like us to come back then with the revisions to the budget based upon sales tax? And or adding a judgment clerk
And that would be the sheriff's presentation
right,
and
we'll have to move.
Shrek's presentation as well, would need to be moved.
Yep, which just is gonna have to happen.
Yeah, right.
So I think we still have some capacity on November the 6th in the morning. On our tentative schedule, we had scrap scheduled for then, so we can buddy. We'll see if the sheriff is available to buddy in there with Public Works, scraps, Shrek.
But as far as coming back
It'll be a
with,
very busy morning.
but as far as coming back with the budget updates, I think we should probably do that sooner than later.
And I think we have to look at going all day Mondays. I mean, if we need to,
That's fine.
going into the budget, it's like, we kind of anticipate Mondays and Tuesdays are, and so
So
if
we
we have
can
to go even
definitely do
after
it.
2 o'clock meeting,
We can do
we
an
can do
all-day
that.
session that Monday if you would prefer. Do you want to meet before then as well?
Just a second, let me see what Amber's thoughts are. Commissioner Waldron?
Oh, yes. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can now. You kind of go in and out a little bit.
I put my little earpiece in. I was hoping that would help. Okay. No, I was going to suggest going all day or maybe next Monday if we needed to adjust, next Monday morning or so. Those are just my suggestion.
And I think we're going to have to schedule the 23rd based on some of the, Jeff will be briefing tomorrow on federal lobbyist RFP. That's going to need some time with the commissioners on the 23rd likely. I think we're also going to we'll be in a position to be able to share the jail capacity analysis. And then, we could do budgets, we could do at least the touches on the budget forecast with some of the changes that are being made and spend any time on the capital, outside agencies, that sort of thing as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just have on that Monday, I'm meeting at 4 o'clock that got scheduled.
So you want to put down next Monday, the 23rd as a holder for a meeting?
Yeah, and if we can move anybody that we need to move.
Okay.
And again, I think we can break for lunch and then come back.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Because I know we're just getting tight on times. I know you have some more stuff down here on schedules. Is that what let's just talk all schedules. We've got the 13th and the 20th.
Yeah, right now the commissioners are not scheduled to meet on the 13th or the 20th. 13th is the week of Wasac, I believe. The 20th is the Thanksgiving Day weekend. So I suspect with budgets and us coming towards the end, we're gonna need some time to have some meetings with the commissioners on one or both of those weeks. We'll know more as we get through the 23rd, the 6th, and being able to target kind of which how much time we think we need for those. I'm just kind of flagging them for the commissioners if one of those weeks work better than the other one. I know we just had a NEPDA meeting that got scheduled on 13th at 10, but we certainly have the 14th available, the afternoon of the 13th, and then same with the week of the 20th.
So the 14th, the board of directors start meeting at noon for Wasac, so I've got meetings already booked with Wasac, pre-Wasac stuff.
14th would be better, or I'm sorry, 20th would be better for me. Just because we already have that, like you said, the NEPDA scheduled on the 13th for a special meeting. Commissioner CUNY, as she stated, for Wasac.
20th is better for me.
Okay.
I would say the 20th, I may be late, just because I've got the canvassing board meeting at 9, which will only go half hour, so.
We do a 10
Let's start at 10.
We can start at 10.
Start later.
Okay, November 20th.
Or I'd say just start, I mean, I'm only half hour. Not that big deal. Start at 9:30.
9:30.
But I would suggest, just because that week is crazy with Thanksgiving, that if we can do afternoons, I would say let's just,
Carry over it into the afternoon if we need it?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I think, some of the budget departments, because you had, 3 departments scheduled for that 30th, can we move them to one of the afternoons? And adding the 23rd that morning, but I think, we can accomplish a lot if we work in the morning, then work in the afternoon.
Yep. We'll go back and work with the departments to see what their flexibility, their preparedness is, and we'll schedule accordingly.
Because we're already scheduled on the 6th.
Yes.
So then I would say the afternoon of the 6th would be another opportunity.
Yep.
So another thing regarding our calendar, so you, me, and Commissioner Waldrop on the 30th.
Yes, you had left the room.
Yes, I
We
did.
talked about
Did you bring that
so
up already?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, because we are scheduled for interviews that day.
Yes.
So yes, so I let them know that when we all looked at our
Alright.
calendars, we didn't have anything and suddenly things were on there. So that's part of what, trying to readjust. But I think that's where, again, we can go into an afternoon, 2 to 5,
Okay.
and knock some of this stuff out.
Why do we plan right now, tentatively, or right now, the 23rd on that Monday, the 6th on the afternoon, and the 20th at 9:30.
I would say let's shoot for October 23rd and November 6th for all day. And then hopefully we don't have to do the 20th.
Okay.
And I hope that if we need to do the 20th, then we could, but hopefully we can.
We can always tentatively place it and then cancel if we don't need it.
Yeah. I'm here working, so it doesn't matter, but I mean, I think there's decisions that need to get made.
Better to have it on the calendar and
Prior.
then cancel if we need to.
All right, we will have those alternate scenarios for you next week, and we will send out that additional request for the outside agencies to you today. Additional request, excuse me. All right,
Commissioner Kearns,
that's all I have.
regional homeless update.
No, I was just thinking it'd be good if we had a discussion. We have another meeting this Thursday coming up on the regional homelessness, but 2 Thursdays ago, Scott, Commissioner Jordan, and myself were there. So I was just thinking it would be nice to kind of have a discussion and sort of where we're at. So the last meeting, we spent a great deal of time talking about the composition of the PDA board. That was probably close to half, probably the second half of the meeting was spent on that. The
Once
first
we got to
half.
the scope, right?
Yeah, the first half was spent on sort of the scope, and they broke it down into sort of 3 different possibilities as far as scope. And what they mean by scope so they were thinking, sort of looking at sort of where we are, all the conversations we've gone, all the time we've spent on this, and what what the discussion has been among stakeholders. We're looking at having 3 different options. So option 1, they were calling the base option. And the scope of that would be just regional homelessness. And as opposed to the second option, which would be focusing on regional homelessness and behavioral health, or what the original sort of rollout to the community was, which would have focused on regional homelessness, behavioral health, and affordable housing. So they're thinking, should we scale it back to focusing on just regional homelessness, and the defined funding streams would be regional, federal, and state pass-through dollars, and they've defined those as $7 million, roughly. That's the estimate for continuum of care dollars, which they say are through HUD. $9 million, which are consolidated homeless grants through Commerce, and $4 million of the housing and essential needs also coming through Commerce. And so that was sort of what we spent the first half of the meeting on. It seemed those in the room, the majority of the people in there seemed to think focusing on that first base level option of regional homelessness was the way to go. And then, so I don't know if we want to have discussion around that before we jump into sort of what the second hour was spent on, but I mean, and please jump in on your thoughts on other things that stuck out to you guys. So, and George was online too, so he was there too. So we had 4 of us there.
Yeah, I kind of filled in for Amber, and it seemed like there was a pretty strong consensus to scale back from that very large scope and really just focus on dollars that really could or should be running through a regional strategy process anyway, and that there are potential other funding sources like recording fees and other things that might fit in that bucket.
That's
but
right. That was the one thing
you could build
that someone
on that,
asked
right?
why. Yeah, they had the document recording fees, which they estimated at 3 million. They had that down in sort of the scaled up version. But yeah, there was discussion of should that also be a funding source. Right? Yeah.
So my takeaway was start small, start with those core dollars, and then work on the relationship piece of it. So Scott brought up Justin's team has a lot of important projects they already do on behavioral health. So rather than trying to swallow up any of those dollars, partner between the Homeless Authority and Justin's team on where those gaps might be and build that trust and success over time. So that seemed to be the consensus.
Yeah, that was my recollection as well. I was reaffirming, I wasn't at the previous ones, was reaffirming the kind of the base model, if you would, which would be the COC, the Consolidated Homeless Grant, the Housing and Essential Needs, the hand dollars. And those are dollars that just go through the City of Spokane. The CHG comes, City of Spokane receives some, and Spokane County receives some as well. And the COC dollars, I believe, are dollars coming from HUD as part of the collaborative applicant process, of which the City of Spokane, I believe, is the collaborative applicant. George can correct me if I'm wrong. And those dollars, you have to have a COC set up to be able to receive those dollars.
I think maybe a couple of folks from Medical Lake said they wanted us to go more ambitious, if I'm recalling. But
So,
they were,
some of the smaller cities were like, no,
Step on it.
keep going, March, full meal deal.
Commissioner Waldron?
thank you for attending, Commissioner Jordan, since I was out of town last week. So if different jurisdictions wanted to add in like recording fees and didn't want to manage those on their own, that could be an option. But basically, any dollars that would be passed through from Fed or Commerce that's basically where folks ended up.
Yeah, and you know, like if you go down, if the scope was scaled up, like once you get into the next one, there was the $1590 from the city. They were very very assertive that those dollars would not be going to this effort. So yeah.
Right. I'm just saying if there's a particular local stream that is dedicated to homeless reduction, it would make sense for us to put that into the pot rather than try and manage that with less staff on our own at the county, right? I don't know, just that was my thought.
The one clarification on the federal dollars, the only discussion for dedicating to the homeless authority was the HUD COC dollars, not CDBG, not home, not ESG, not those.
I don't think we really talked about the recording fees in great detail, right? But personally, I don't see why it couldn't be an option, right? Hey, if you want to throw that in as an individual decision of Airway Heights or whoever, go right ahead. It wasn't a requirement though for the baseline.
Yeah, it was thrown out that like we should look in to see how those dollars are spent today, what programs they're currently funding. So
Yeah, because
I honestly, I don't, George, do you know?
I can get you the list. We just had it last week at our HCDAC meeting, so yeah, we have that.
Okay.
And does the Valley get theirs separately?
They do, just starting in August.
Okay, so they're already getting theirs separately, so it'd just be unincorporated county dollars that we would have access to do that. And yeah, so if you can tell us how much and kind of who those dollars go towards, that'd be great. I guess I am much happier with the smaller, with the real scope that in my mind has always been what we were supposed to be focused on, was that emergency housing, which is what, you know, when we kept talking about the Houston model and all of that, that's part of what Houston did. So I think if the discussion is going that way, then I'm much more comfortable at that level of what we're already spending and passing through, because as you know, this was all talked about, that should be enough money if we're doing it more efficiently and effective with it, that you know, nobody was anticipating general fund dollars going towards this. I think the city has in the past, but that's a city decision. That has never been our decision to do that. So I'm comfortable as to continue to move forward with the discussion at that level that isn't going beyond that. So.
And then we jumped into I think much longer discussion than was anticipated on the makeup of PDA board. When we had left the previous meeting, there was discussion of actually going, so from the start, the city of Spokane has had 2 designees on the proposed makeup of the board. 1 county commissioner, 1 Spokane Valley City Council member, 1 small cities rep. Then the prior meeting, the discussion was, well, if the city of Spokane gets 2, then the commissioner should get 2, the valley should get 2, and then 1 small cities rep. And then when we came back this meeting, the new proposal on the table was 1 city of Spokane, 1 county commissioner, 1 valley rep, 1 small cities rep, and a tribal representative. And then so that's 5 in the participating jurisdictional members, and so that would be the makeup of the group that selects the initial 9 sort of stakeholder group, non-electeds that would be on the board. And those really haven't changed in a while. Those are still public housing, private housing, medical, behavioral health, public safety, lived experience, business, philanthropy, and now a continuum of care board chair, having a standing position there. So that was kind of the discussion there. There was some discussion around if there's a tribal representative, who is that tribal representative? There was a strong push for that it would be a Spokane tribe member. There was somebody else who made an argument that there's actually more Colville tribal members living in Spokane County than any other tribe. Folks did ask, we should probably ask the Kalispels, and then other folks were saying, or should it be more of a tribal organization like the
AICC,
no, that wasn't the one. Native Project was one of the names thrown out. So an organization like that. So there's a lot of discussion there. Didn't really come to an agreement one way or the other. But yeah, that another discussion, and we spent a great deal of time on that section. So there still was some concern around the table that with these being tax dollars that are spent, yes, coming from the feds and state as opposed to local, there still needs to be some accountability on how those are spent. So there was some concern by some around the table that if these are spent in ways that sort of don't work, or ways that the elected leaders around the table don't like. I mean, it's a majority of non-electeds that could sort of run the table on how these dollars are spent. And so that's why there was some discussion about sort of maybe closing that gap between elected and non-elected on the board. So, or on the proposed PDA board structure. So we didn't get past much past that. That there were many more slides here that we didn't get to. So.
Commissioner French?
Yes, as you list up those opportunities for Native Americans to be represented, I do like the idea of the Native American Project, because that serves all the tribes, and actually, many more tribes than the traditional 4 or 5 that are represented here and stuff. So that might be a pretty good option, and they're a service provider.
Thank you. I guess I would say similar to, Commissioner French, are you wanting to speak again? That as we've seen with the health district, the tribes need to come together to make a decision, and that's not happening. And I don't want to be in the middle of making decisions on which tribe or who has more members in our community. I mean, so to me, it's like, if it's going to be a tribal member, there has to be a come together of the tribes to make that decision, just like we have to come together as electeds when we only have one elected on to make a decision. So yeah. I don't want to get in the middle of what.
Understood. And another one of the things that Councilman one of the members, Councilman Bingle, had actually pointed out was those jurisdictional partners would be the ones that are essentially bringing the dollars to the table. And so I had said, would it make more sense for the tribal members to have a seat more on the stakeholders below? Because I honestly don't understand. I don't know their funding sources. I don't know if they would intend to bring dollars to the table here. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be a part of this effort, but I just wonder if it would make more sense having them down below as one of those stakeholder representative seats as opposed to one of the jurisdictional seats. So.
And I think has anyone had a discussion with anyone from the tribes?
Nobody in that room had. So
I mean, those would be the first things, that would need to happen, is having those discussions.
I think there was a consensus that there would be some follow-up with various tribal entities to inquire.
But at the time, I don't believe anybody had approached.
Lawrence, would it be fair to say that Councilmember Bingle had put a lot of thought into the current proposal on
I
the table?
believe this is Bingle's
The Bingle
proposed
plan.
structure. It is, I believe it is. Yeah, and I had asked there during the meeting too, I said, so where did this come from? Because this isn't where we left the previous meeting. This structure is new, this isn't where we finished, and so, yeah, I believe this was Councilmember Bingle's proposal.
So you guys will be discussing more this
We will
Thursday?
be discussing more this Thursday, and we'll see how much we get through.
Well, because as you know, I mean, these are federal dollars and there's
Yeah.
requirements for all these dollars. So it's like they do have to be spent in accordance of the grant allows them to be spent.
Yep.
So, even if non-electeds were trying to run the table, as you were saying, I mean, it's still like, they still have to be spent legally.
Yes, oh, yeah, no,
It's
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the thing to make sure is that, sometimes what we've seen on other committees is when you're not the elected, you don't always understand all the different government requirements.
Yeah.
On them, and so,
Yeah, and
it's just making sure that there's.
yeah, and I mean, that, I guess that I don't want to imply that the dollars would be spent inappropriately. It would just be if the dollars were, I mean, the makeup of that board is going to direct the way the dollars are spent. I don't think there's going to be any issue with them being spent, not in accordance with the strings that are attached or the sideboards that are put in place. But if they're spent in a way that the majority of the public doesn't like, essentially the argument was, those who are held accountable are those elected officials, that there's no accountability to the to the 9 members, but there is to a minority of that board, was I think the argument that the folks were making. So that's why there was an argument that should there be more electeds, because they're the ones that are held accountable at the end of the day on if the public is happy on the way those dollars are spent. So.
Because we're still, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're still looking at a PDA, which is a government entity, versus a nonprofit, which would take us out of that.
Yeah.
So
Nobody's been floating the nonprofit idea yet.
So then it's still a government entity, but.
As of now.
There was, it seemed like we kind of had to rush through the end of the meeting. They threw out some ideas on the advisory board, right, or technical group that would do a lot of the, suggestions and recommendations. And it sounded to me like there's some possibility to take the COC and somehow kind of merge it or tie it in with the advisory board, but there seemed to be a lot more conversation that needs to happen with the COC before they figure out how does that board really fit in with this effort. Is that fair?
I think so. And
There's a little rush there.
yeah, maybe George, you'd probably be more, because several months ago, there was a discussion about combining this with the COC, but other folks were saying that the legal structure for the COC, they have to remain a standalone entity. They can't be merged with some folks were saying that several months ago. I don't know if that was accurate or not, but.
Yeah, I don't think they quite graduated to exactly how the COC works with this. I think Commissioner Jordan's, that's similar to what I heard as well, like is the COC, because they talked about having a COC rep on the board, but then what role does the COC play in advisory too? There's also the question of the city of Spokane is the collaborative applicant and therefore the responsible entity for the continuum of care itself. So anyways, there's a lot of moving pieces, and how it'll all end up kind of intersecting is still part of the discussion, I think.
And I mean, that's part of what's got to get figured out, because I think from HUD's perspective, you have to have the dollars go through the COC. So anyway, so that's why I think when I was sharing with them kind of what Pierce County was looking at, I mean, the COC discussion was very much part of what Pierce County's trying to figure out, because of the fact the dollars coming through HUD. So I think sounds like they're still trying to figure out what that looks like and why.
Yeah.
The rationale for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you have a fun meeting.
Yeah, and as to Commissioner Jordan's point, yeah, we did touch on, and there was a slide here that we got that, I mean, I think that they envision there being a pretty large, robust subcommittee structure, or advisory committee structure beneath the PDA, so. But we're not quite there yet to take the deep dive into those yet.
And then reviewing the agenda for this Thursday, there's a continuation of this governance structure. I think we've got another 50 to an hour long conversation regarding that. And then the final agenda item is the public process. So looks like they're going to be talking more about what does the outward facing conversation start to look like. So be interested to see where that goes.
So as long as we're talking about homelessness, so can you update us on where we're at with the Commerce Grant?
Yeah, I can. Met with the city of Spokane and the stakeholders that are receiving that funding last Monday. So for reference, this is the Washington State Department of Commerce encampment resolution program. So this is the continuation of or refinement of the former right-of-way grant as it related to Camp Hope. So there were a few assumptions going into that meeting that became clear to me following. One is that the agencies that had been, so there's the request for proposal, it's out, it's due back to Commerce on the 25th of October. We now know factually that Commerce already has 18 million of that approximately under contract of the 21 total. So that is, they're under contract with the city of Spokane for this current state fiscal year, as well as Volunteers of America, Empire Health Foundation, and Catholic Charities. So previously, I was unaware who was under contract and what the status of all of that is. So those contracts are in place and executed. So I think I mentioned before, this request for proposal is a little unique to our situation because Commerce came in last year and contracted directly with these service providers.
Yeah, when you read the request for proposal, I guess my concern is it says the county is the one who's supposed to be putting this in. So since we're not, it was already predetermined other than 3.2?
Approximately 3.2 of the total allocation is not accounted for.
So Commerce has already decided prior to it coming for Spokane County that of the 23 million, 3.2 is unallocated.
That was nice of them. No, they did that work for us, huh?
Yes. So then on the 3.2, you were meeting with the city and stakeholders, and so what came of that meeting?
So from that meeting, there were several questions that came up. The city of Spokane reached out to Commerce with those questions directly. I felt it was important that we reach out to Commerce and actually have a conversation with them as opposed to the back and forth email, just given the time sensitivity for this request for proposal. I've not heard back from the Department of Commerce yet. I did an additional follow-up with them this morning. I also reached out to Kim McCollum over at the city of Spokane to see if she's had any additional conversations. So there are a few things that we're trying to figure out. One, mainly, since the majority of these funds are already under contract with Commerce, is their intent that we are looking for potentially other right-of-way encampments that we could use that money for, or is the intent that it's used for?
But in the RFP, in the request, I mean, some of it specifically was supposed to be going for law enforcement for doing law enforcement. And so I guess that's part of, I've got a lot of questions, and this is due the 25th, so it's due Wednesday. Last year, we actually did a letter of support when we turned in this, which we're not gonna have time to put in a letter of support or even a letter of here are our thoughts. Because, I mean, I think realistically, I mean, what you guys are looking at for the homeless authority is if you look at that top tier of what dollars are being spent, it's like $20 million. So this is now double, more than what we'd even be allocating to our homeless authority that is coming in. And so I think at some point, I, as one commissioner, will write a letter, but I think we may want to look at it as the county, looking at it that, I mean, they're coming in making decisions in our community on how they think to spend these dollars when, the request is that the county is supposed to be putting in a proposal. So I think we just have to at least state that the request is the county is supposed to be turning in this as the regional entity, and that we're down to $3 million of the $23 million, and just at least state that because we were not part of those decisions. And I think I feel pretty strongly that to reply back to this request for proposal that should have been a separate request for proposal to us that only gave us the ability to allocate the $3 million. And we don't even, I mean, I guess that's what I'm wondering is, so do we think we know what that we're doing with the $3 million when I think over $1 million was supposed to go to law enforcement?
Yeah, so to that point in the request for proposal, there were 3 separate funding line items. One of them was law enforcement. Another one had a match provision to the number of beds. And those are unknowns because we don't know what's in the contracts with these entities. So that's one of the questions that we have into Commerce is, does this rule apply to the $3.2 million of the uncommitted funds or not? So that's one of our several questions.
Well, and so then my question would be to Commerce is security different than law enforcement? Because law enforcement means something different to me than a security patrol. I mean, and I'm just looking at what I don't have it in front of me, but just what their request was that you had sent us all a couple weeks ago. I think you'd sent that out to all of us. Yeah. So when I looked at it, I was just, I don't know, there's just, questions, you and I had a discussion about it, but questions I have that, again, I just feel like as you guys are, trying to attend these meetings on a regional homeless authority, and then we've got, Commerce coming in separately, putting more money into our community than, for, I don't know. I mean, if you go to Commerce's website, it's 26 people from Camp Hope that were permanently housed. So I don't know, and it states in the request for proposal that 80% has to be going to right-of-way encampments, which we don't have anymore, unless there's some that I don't know of. But, even if it's still going to Camp Hope residents, I mean, there's no metrics on any of that. So that's where I just feel like as we turn in this letter, or this proposal gets turned in, it's like, I feel like we would want to have a letter just stating our thoughts.
Absolutely. So I've let the city of Spokane know that if there's to be a letter of the commissioners, or at least a letter from the commissioners, however you all choose to go, that we need to have that figured out this week, so I can have it to you all by next week for briefing, to meet that 25th deadline.
So, yes, we're on the 16th. Somehow I'm like a week ahead of myself, so it's not this Wednesday, it's next Wednesday. So anyways, I just wanted to bring that up as you guys talked about homelessness, that was the other piece that as I looked into it and read that request, it was interesting. And when you look at the request came out, I think on October 8th, and the spreadsheet was produced by Commerce on October 7th. So they sent their spreadsheet of what they'd already contracted. Well, and I didn't know that it was already contracted that way, but it is.
Yeah.
It was certainly in their mind allocated. And then what I'm hearing from someone that I know on Catholic Charities Board, is it a 3-year contract that Commerce has with Catholic Charities for Catalyst?
Yeah, and that is $6.9 million a year for Catalyst for ongoing support at that facility. I do want to just add on data. I believe there is data for these funds. I have not seen it other than that 26 that we see on the Department of Commerce's website. I did get confirmation from Commerce all the way up to their division director that is the accurate number that they have. But that there is data that's been collected here locally. There was conversation about that at the meeting last Monday. And I did inform the folks that until we see that data, it's an assumption that the data exists. So I did challenge them. They're running into the same data issues that a lot of folks run into. I'm trying to true that up, but I will certainly have that data to you all once it's provided.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is the same thing, but didn't we have Zeke come brief us as a board a while back, and didn't he have data in a presentation? I just don't know if that's what you're talking about, locally collected.
That was last year
Okay.
with Camp Hope.
You're talking
Or
about
it could have
new.
been like in January of this year, which is some of the data, but that's not what's showing up on Commerce's website.
Okay, so there's maybe a disconnect between the ground level and the state.
Yeah, and I did reach out to Zeke as well and said, Zeke, please provide some of that data as part of this request for proposal. And then he connected me with his staff, and that was part of the conversation that we had Monday of last week. So they definitely have it. It's just we need to see it.
So, which is part of, if these people have gotten help from last year, then do they need additional $8 million? Because Empire Health is contracted for another $8 million. For what population group, I don't know. And then, I think we just need to figure out, because based on that data and who's been helped and has received help, who's still needing help, which we don't know, then, and if Catalyst, who had 80 to 100 people project with Catholic Charities, it's one of those, it's like, then where would we put the other $3 million, that is providing opportunities? Because like I said, 80% is supposed to go to the encampment, 20% can go to non-encampment.
And in the request for a proposal, they talk very specifically about the by name list. So my assumption is that by name list that was created as part of Camp Hope, there should be a summary of kind of the progress that's been made on that. So that's something that I would hope to be able to see eventually, kind of progress made there.
I think we still have a public records request for that list that the county did back when they first did the name badges. I understand from the sheriff's office. So I just worry that, again, with trying to develop this homeless authority, kind of what this does.
Yeah, no, and I brought that up at one of the previous meetings with the regional homelessness. I said, if this entity is stood up and functioning, is the state going to respect that we now have a regional authority, and are they going to be the recipient of those funds to help distribute those? Or is the state still gonna try to pick winners and losers as far as providers, kind of usurping this regional authority. And I mean, of course, nobody has an answer for that, so, but it is a concern.
Also, you guys may talk about it Thursday, but about it, you know, just because I'd be curious what you're thinking with that.
Yeah.
I think a concern that I have when I think about ongoing operations, sustainability, et cetera, is if last year Commerce invested $26 million into this project, this current state fiscal year, July 1 of 23 through June 30th of 24, it's actually $21.3 million. And then in state fiscal year 25, it's another $13.4 million. That's a really big cliff to come off of after state fiscal year 25 ends. So I've got concerns about this amount of investment, and then how do we make up that difference? So for example, at the Catalyst building at $6.9 million a year, how do we as a community ensure if that's the responsibility of the public to maintain that ongoing? What plans or strategies are in place locally, but then also Commerce, what strategies do you have for ongoing sustainability there? So that's just kind of a forward-looking concern that I have with that amount of funding, because we don't have, as a county, we don't have that kind of grant revenue coming in to support that level of investment.
No, and I think in this spreadsheet, it shows like just under 990,000 going to Hope House at VOA, which I think is what it costs them to operate for the year. I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know that, but you're correct,
So
it
that
is
would be,
990.
you know, a question that I have for them, because I think when they've come to us for funding, that was, I think, about the numbers total. But anyway, you know, yeah, there's just a lot of questions that I think we need to, you know, now's the time to ask the questions as they're trying to put this together. And if the Commerce really wants a regional homeless authority, and if that's what they really think, then maybe part of that $3 million could go to help, you know, startup funding for it, you know, to get it off and get some of these contracts out that could be, you know, kind of make up for the contracts that we have that are finishing, to help start new contracts through the homeless authority. Maybe that's a way to use some of those dollars. So Scott and I talked about that would be, you know, one way to do it. Yeah, because it's for the entire fiscal year, so it's like, even if we don't get it up and going, maybe that's a way to fund the executive director and start the process. Just thinking through things.
Yeah.
Amber, sorry.
No, I just popped my hand up because I thought what you had to say there was a really good idea around the startup funding. But I'm trying to understand when the decisions will be made around this funding, and is there an opportunity for us to give an update to Commerce about the progress we've made toward a regional authority, and that we're hoping to, you know, get that accomplished by the end of the year? Is there an opportunity to make a case for them to reserve some of those funds for the homeless authority?
So the RFP came out, or the request came out October 8th was when it was sent out. And it's due October 25th. So there wasn't a lot of time, and I know that you guys just met Monday of last week, and then are you meeting again?
Hopefully, yeah, to be determined, but I think, sorry, go ahead, Amber.
But what I thought, I heard you say that they've already identified
Yes, when they sent,
agencies for the funding.
so when they sent out the request on October 8th, they sent on a spreadsheet as well of where they already identified for Spokane County, all but $3 million.
Okay, so what is the purpose of the RFP then?
Well, that's actually, yes,
The 3
part
million.
of it, the 3 million that's left. So,
Oh, so there's still 3 million after the other agencies.
yes.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was thinking it was all allocated and I thought this is a strange exercise. Okay. So I definitely, so then, yeah, I mean, I really do think that we need to ask for some of those funds to be put towards the homeless authority. Maybe there's like a reserve account, because I know it's not set up yet. I know we haven't signed a charter or anything yet. But I'm feeling confident that we're moving in that direction. So it would be good to have some reserve dollars, or let Commerce know that, so that they can be aware. And I don't know. So I wasn't sure if that was communicated or not, George.
No, but I think that's what I was just communicating to George, that maybe with some of that $3 million that we have, could some of that be reserved to help with startup costs? Because it's for fiscal year 23, 24. So it goes all the way till next July, or.
So let me add to that. For this current fiscal year that we're in, starting July 1 of 23 through June 30th of 24, it's approximately $3.2 million. And according to the table here, Commerce has, of the 13.4 million committed for state fiscal year 25, so July 1, 24 through June 30th, 25, they have committed $10.1 million of the total 13.4. So we could be looking at a 3.2 and 3.23 $1 million for the next, I guess at this point now, 20 months. So that could be a great investment for us locally.
Over 6
Okay,
for the
yeah.
2 fiscal years.
Yep.
Okay.
And then it's gonna be up to the homeless authority to determine how people get funded after that. So.
Yeah. Well, I would be in favor of, if there's a way we can craft that. I know it's a bit risky because we don't know when we might sign a charter and get that organization going. But anyway, it's a great opportunity. I like where you're thinking, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you.
Is that something that you all would like me to reach out and start some conversations with both Commerce and the city regarding? Because that hasn't been on the table until this thought.
I mean, I think it's, you gotta put everything out there. So
Yeah.
they may not do it, but it's interesting because what I hear from different people talking to Commerce and I mean, I was talking with Gavin and Rick, that Commerce wants us to move forward with the homeless authority. But yet they're undermining the efforts by doing this funding outside of, working together on it. So it's like, then help us get there.
Can I just ask, do any of the members of the Board of County Commissioners have any concerns with that, or
No.
pursuing that?
No, I mean, I think that we've got to start thinking and acting that our goal is to work regionally and to push these dollars out more strategically.
For the discussion.
Great conversation.
Makes the RFP process response a little easier. We spent a lot of time on it last year, working with the City of Spokane Valley, and put forth the unified, as much unified as we could, and then it was ignored. So I want to be thoughtful of not consuming a bunch of staff time if that's the end result again. But if it's simply to say excess funds go to the future regional homeless authority, that simplifies it.
And I can't remember on the spreadsheet if dollars were already going to track.
They are, yes. So the Trend Resource Center, the allocation for both years is $1,725,000.
Just a clarifying question, if we responded to the RFP saying we would propose setting this aside as startup costs for the homeless regional entity, would we need to identify a backup plan in the case that that entity is not
Well,
formed?
I think what they're doing right now is trying to figure out where those $3 million should be spent.
Okay, what's the strings
So,
on it?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, where they should go. So they're gonna be coming up with that, but I think that's where our letter then could say, this is what is left, this is what's, because I mean, Commerce decides. We could say, we think we should, we would support these things, but we also think you should look at helping get the regional authority up and going. But I think have the discussion in the meeting, because I don't know where they're thinking the other $3 million is gonna go. And like I said, the 20 million that we know is in the community is already allocated and out there. So I mean, this is then now 20 million that's coming in, 21 million in addition to that's already now going to people. So we're never going to be able to fund a $40 million, homeless authority in the future. I mean, that's just not realistic. So as these dollars step down from 26 to 23 to 13.
And this is the right of way funding, okay.
So it's like, I feel like there's expectations that are there that then will go away and people will be upset.
Yeah.
So. And have we seen again, not having the data to, have we seen a decrease? Have we seen, what's happened, with people? Because I believe Camp Hope was considered part of the point in time count when it was done at the time. So have we seen a reduction in homeless numbers? But that's for this group to provide the data on that. So, thanks, George.
Yeah,
Thanks for listening on my thoughts.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other miscellaneous? Sorry, that took longer, but I know we all have gotten that RFP, that request. George has sent it out, like, the first part, after he got it, when we talked about the first time. So when I was looking at it, it's interesting. Any miscellaneous or?
I have one very short executive session that we could either do this morning or tomorrow.
I would vote tomorrow.
Perfectly fine.
Okay, I can do that tomorrow.
Emergency.
And then I had a question. I'd heard that Tony Hall's resigned.
So, where's Randy?
Yes,
I heard too.
That is correct. He's going to non-governmental agency. His last day will be end of this week. We have posted for his position.
It's an amazing opportunity, so.
That's too bad, he was really good.
He was amazing.
Amazing
Yeah.
loss for us as well, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a much larger promotional opportunity role. We just don't have available here in the county, so.
I just say it's one of those, since he's a director, it'd be nice for us to hear, just give us a heads
Yeah,
up.
I didn't know if he had made it public yet or not, so, yes. Yeah, big loss for us. He's not running away from anything, he's running towards an excellent opportunity.
If he's leaving Friday, I would think it's public.
Well, it is now.
Yes. Or that's why you give us the heads up, so then we don't make it public if
Yeah,
it's not supposed to be. But I'd rather hear it from you than from rumors out out in the courthouse areas. So that's why I was like, I need to just double check if that's true or not. So yes, no, it'll be definitely sad. It's a great opportunity for him. I'm excited for him. I never am sad when people get to, go off and do bigger, better things. So, but yeah, definitely be a loss. And then I think it gives an opportunity to look at what that department looks like in their remote status or not, and maybe someone new. And so, any other miscellaneous?
Is anyone else going to the event with, is
Yes,
there
the
a VOA?
VOA,
Okay.
yeah.
See you there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then we are at noon, so we will adjourn for the day and be back tomorrow morning. Thank you all very much.